She always considered herself a happy person. The beautiful blonde and blue-eyed woman in a wedding dress and a crown with sapphires was the only daughter of the Marquis of Fereste, and her name was Diana El Fereste. Her fiancé was Calypso de Ernst, Archduke of the Ernst family. Diana's father loved his only daughter too much, and because of this, he missed the right time to conclude a marriage union, and therefore she married a duke who only had an attractive appearance and no other merits. However, on the day when they both stood at the altar, Diana was truly happy. He and Calypso had a not passionate but tender love, which soon bore fruit in the form of pregnancy. The Duchess gave birth to Catherine on time, who was as fair-haired as her husband. Her daughter became everything to Diana. Catherine grew up in an atmosphere of universal adoration. She became a beautiful and cheerful girl, and that day at first seemed surprisingly happy to them all. They walked along the brightly sunny lawn, escaping from the heat under a large umbrella. That day it happened, Catherine, who had been so beautiful and cheerful before, sat on the ground, shedding bloody tears and calling for her mother. The Duke, Diana, and Diana's companion had called a doctor to the girl and were now waiting outside the door for the verdict, which was finally announced, and it was announced that Catherine had lost her sight due to a blinding, poisonous plant. Catherine lay in bed and cried inconsolably. She understood that she would never again be able to see either the beautiful flowers or the birds dear to her heart. Diana's heart was squeezed by maternal grief and pity for the poor girl. Weeping bitterly herself, the Duchess looked at her companion and asked if there really was no way. The red-haired companion, Alice, looked at Diana as if she had something to say to that question. Finally, she looked away and said that she had heard that it was possible to transfer someone's vision to her using magical power. Diana's tear-filled eyes looked at her companion with hidden hope. She asked the Duke to prepare a carriage in which she was going to go to the temple. The Duke was outraged by this decision. "Darling," Diana said, barely able to pronounce the word through her constricted throat, choking on the tears that tormented her. She assured her husband that she loved her daughter Catherine much more than her own life. That's how it happened. Diana was a little scared, but then everything became okay. After all, it was all for Catherine. It was not easy to get used to, but that was also okay. Diana learned to wear a blindfold, and so January of the 22nd year of the imperial calendar arrived. Alice, Diana's companion, childhood friend and family doctor, was constantly caring for the Duchess. Diana gradually learned to navigate the corridors of the castle. Everything was getting better. Only one day, when the woman was walking down a dark corridor alone, she heard someone confessing their love to someone. She came closer to listen to this conversation. "I love you, Calypso," said the female voice, and the male voice replied that he loved you even more. Diana walked out into the hall where her husband and another woman were. "Darling, that's a lie," Diana said hesitantly. She stood in front of the two, still hoping that she had just heard things. Her face was frozen in an expression of horror at what was revealed to her in one instant. She stood in front of them, still waiting for an answer to her question. "Dear Alice," she said to the people around her, whom she had long considered her closest, but she heard only mockery. People who were the closest she had ever been in this world treated her like a fool. Alice said that even when Diana was given a hint about the real state of affairs, she still behaved like a fool. Diana fell to her knees, exhausted, and touched the floor in front of her with her palms. All these revelations had really undermined her. "Darling," she said again, still hoping that the situation would somehow clear up. She waited for his answer with hope, then screamed. The men in uniform whom the Duke had summoned joined them in this hall. Calypso ordered them to take the Duchess away, and Diana was grabbed by the arms, lifted from the floor and dragged towards the exit. She was thrown into a dark room, a warehouse, in which there were some barrels, and the corners were covered in cobwebs. "Goodbye, Your Highness, the former Duchess," Diana heard at last. She sat in this dirty room. She didn't know how much time, how many days had passed since she was thrown here. Someone brought her stale bread wrapped in a napkin. It was her only food, and Diana wondered if Catherine had taken care of her in this way because she was worried about her. Diana thought a lot about her beloved daughter, about whether everything was okay with her, whether she was crying because her mother was no longer with her. Diana herself cried a lot during this period. She had to somehow protect her daughter, but she was unable to do anything for her. One day the door opened and someone entered her prison. This person rudely called out to her to see if she was still dead. Diana took her hands away from her face. She recognized the voice she heard now. Catherine, her beloved girl, stood on the threshold of the place where she was locked up. Someone else came with Catherine, and Catherine indifferently asked this person if Diana was dead yet, and then called her companion Mommy. The word hit Diana hard, and then she heard the suggestion that she should have died here of hunger long ago. It was Alice speaking. It was the voice of her childhood friend and companion. Diana realized this with horror. She jumped up and rushed towards Alice, stretching out her arms towards her. But Alice took a step to the side, and blind Diana did not catch her, rushing past. She tripped and fell to the floor, hitting her whole body painfully. "Silly Diana," said her former friend, looking at her, and Catherine's offensive laughter sounded right next to her. "Catherine is my daughter," Alice suddenly informed her. But Diana could not believe what she was hearing, because it simply could not be. "That's enough, Mom," Catherine said cheerfully. She noticed that this fool had given her sight to someone who was only pretending to be blind. Diana, too, could not bring herself to believe at once that she had been subjected to such deception by her own daughter. She asked the triumphant Alice if Catherine was not her daughter, then where was her real girl? Alice did not answer at once, but looked at another person who had entered. It was a servant from the magic tower who brought something bulky wrapped in a dirty piece of cloth. He threw his burden down where Diana was still sitting on the floor. Diana's blind eyes filled with tears, but she could not see what was happening. Alice said that only one person dared to disobey the orders of the new mistress and brought food to Diana, even when she strictly forbade it. Diana reached out with trembling hands to the bundle that lay next to her and felt it. Alice said that even though the girl had lived her entire life as a servant, to her fear, it was still impossible to deceive the blood. Diana didn't see, but she could guess what happened now. The girl who lay lifeless before her, how could Diana now know that this was her real daughter? But Alice said that she could show mercy to her real child at least at the last moment. With these words, Alice and Catherine left the room for fresh air. Diana was left alone. She curled up on the floor and howled with grief and pain, but she still heard the command to fill up with poisonous powder. She didn't care anymore. She could only cry and mourn her daughter. She hugged the girl and asked for forgiveness for failing to protect her. Now she regretted it with all her heart. This girl had risked her own life to protect such a worthless mother, and now they were dying here in a room filled with poison. Diana had almost no strength left for anything, and her time was completely over. And yet she asked, without understanding who she was addressing now, that if another life existed, then her girl would return to her. Then she won't confuse her with anyone else. She begged for it, squeezing the girl's hand in hers. That was the last thing she remembered before she opened her eyes in her own bed on a bright, sunny morning. Diana gasped for fresh air that was completely free of poison. In complete shock, Diana opened her eyes and looked straight ahead. White birds circled in the bright azure sky in the sunlight. Diana thought about that sunlight. She hadn't seen it for so long. Her hands clenched in the folds of the fabric. She didn't understand what had happened. She was not in the dusty closet that had become her prison, but in richly furnished, bright chambers in the mansion. The maid who entered the room pulled back the curtains on the window. She turned to Diana and asked if the Archduchess was awake. It was all too real to continue to consider it a dream. Diana asked the maid what day it was. The maid replied that it was the 1st of the 22nd year, which was the day after Diana lost her sight. She remembered exactly how Alice and Catherine killed her, but now it didn't matter anymore because everything had changed. Did she really go back in time, but with her vision? Then she got a new chance to save her real daughter. Diana swung her legs off the bed and told the maid to show her to the maid's quarters. The maid was surprised because Alice had told her to keep an eye on Diana, confident that even without her sight, she would not lose her title. So the maid said she would help the lady, but in reality she wanted to figure out what she was up to. Together they came to the place where the maids were hanging the laundry on the ropes to dry. All the maids were called into the hall, and Diana immediately apologized for interrupting them from their work. She remembered that Alice had said exactly that her real daughter had grown up here as a servant. Her hands were rough from hard work as she passed Diana the stale bread. She was the same age as Catherine. All this information was very little, and Diana knew nothing about the other, but she still had to try to find it. She turned to the maids to explain to them why she had gathered everyone here today. Diana said that everyone knows that she has problems with her eyes, so she would like to say that she hopes for her people. At this time, the maids continued to whisper. They discussed how funny it was to see a blind duchess, and Mrs. Alice was right. Diana not only heard these conversations, but could also see the faces of those speaking from under the veil that covered her eyes. She saw these women for the first time, and they said that now she wouldn't notice even if they started dancing in front of her, and she remembered that she had changed the entire staff before she became blind. But these claimed that there was nothing special about it, and that they could now not worry too much about the quality of their work. She came and told the Duke about it. She did not see her maids, but Calypso replied that he sent the servants from Parashut to another place, but there was no need to worry. It would not be for long, because additional workers were needed there. Her maids wished her well before leaving. Alice then consoled her. She told Her Highness not to be upset. She would recommend her new people who could be trusted. In a burst of gratitude, Diana hugged Alice tightly and said that she already had too many things to do, like finding a way to cure her. Then Diana thought that Alice was doing everything for her, but in fact, everything was thought out and built to the smallest detail. Now she knew that she couldn't follow their lead. She told the maids that they could go. The head maid replied that the mistress didn't have to worry about anything. The maid looked at her thoughtfully, but so far nothing special had happened. There was nothing to report. At this time, a girl began to descend the stairs covered with a red carpet in the mansion. The girl was going down, and Diana and the maid were going up the stairs. This girl was Catherine, with white hair and purple eyes. Diana acted as if she was following only the maid. Catherine waved her hand with her fingers spread out in front of her face, checking to see if Diana was really blind. The girl put her finger to her lips and urged them not to give her away. She came very close to Diana to step on the hem of her dress. The thin fabric stretched under Catherine's shoe, and Diana, losing her balance, lost her balance. Her body tilted sharply, and she began to fall, not even having time to instinctively put out her hands to protect herself. As she fell helplessly downwards, she suddenly heard her maid calling out to her from somewhere behind her, a frightened voice echoing in her head, already clouded with pain and shame. And Catherine, not hiding her triumph, with a smug grin on her face, calmly turned around and walked on as if nothing had happened, as if her fall was just a trifle, not worth attention. The maid called on Diana to be careful. She said that Her Highness had apparently tripped, and then asked if she was okay. Diana sat on the floor, feeling pain and humiliation, and at that moment a thought flashed piercingly in her heart, because before she truly loved Catherine, loved sincerely, like no one else in this world. Now all this turned into a nightmare. The husband whom she trusted until the very end turned out to be a traitor. He cheated on her, and his lover turned out to be none other than her best friend. Moreover, even the daughter whom she considered hers, as it turned out, was not real, but a changeling. She sat straight on the marble floor, unable to move, and one single thought flashed through her head. She needed to force herself to accept the new, terrible, distorted reality in which she now lived as quickly as possible. Diana didn't know when they would try to kill her again, but she was sure that it would definitely happen. She pressed her palms to her face as if trying to block out what was happening, and mentally tried to sort out this whole confusing situation. The worst thing was that she didn't even understand how she could now find her real daughter in this ruthless world full of lies and betrayal. And then, in the silence and tension, someone confidently knocked on the door of her chambers. Diana, still feeling weak in the knees, rose from the floor and said in an even voice, "Come in." It was Calypso and his companion Alice. Diana tried to stand straight as if nothing had happened, and not to show that she could still see under the bandage. The Duke approached her with feigned concern and asked how his dear wife was feeling, as if everything was still the same between them. Alice simply stood silently next to him, smiling slightly. Her face was calm, even mocking. Diana replied that she was fine, except that she couldn't see anything. She thought it was very impudent of the two to come to her together, as if they liked to do such things on purpose. "Yes," said Calypso, and did not continue the conversation. "That's good," he said, pulling Alice into his arms. Diana clenched her fists. He didn't even try to hide. He wasn't even embarrassed to show his feelings for his mistress in her presence, confident that his blind wife wouldn't see anything. He was no longer embarrassed by Diana's presence and kissed his lover right in front of her, believing that she would not be able to see it anyway. They said a few more pleasantries that sounded like false concern, saying that it was probably difficult for her to get used to being blind, and that if she needed help, she could always turn to them. But now Diana clearly understood that all these words meant nothing. It was empty, feigned politeness. The people standing in front of her were not her friends. They were not her family, only two-faced false traitors. She was never to let on that she saw everything. She was not to notice how Alice was clinging to her husband. She simply said calmly that she felt a little tired today and would like to be alone. "Okay, rest," Calypso replied with the same false concern in his voice. There was the sound of a door slamming and the room became quiet again. They left. And in the corridor, Alice asked the Duke why he had stayed with Diana for so long, to which he, slightly mockingly, replied that she should not be jealous, since, according to him, she herself had enjoyed the visit. Diana, left alone, stared at her cane standing in the corner of the room, rage seething inside her, and she let out a strangled growl, no longer able to contain her feelings. She walked out of her chambers, slowly and carefully, her steps echoing in the darkness of the deserted mansion, and each step was a step towards a new life without illusions. Now she realized that she would never forgive these people. Diana reached the library and walked up to the table, carefully unfolded a sheet of paper, dipped her pen into the inkwell and began to write. She quickly wrote several long letters. These two will still see when she takes revenge on them for everything. Diana El Fereshte was born into the family of the wealthy Marquis of Fereshte and dedicated her entire life to love. She was involved in charity work, helped children in orphanages, and held many events. She also claimed that she was a person who had neither money nor fame. The common people all loved her. She was like the saint of the Fereshte family, descended from heaven. Her fame that she does not differentiate people by status spread far and wide. She even reached the Magic Tower. The man who lived in it spent his time studying magical scrolls and grimoires. It was Mr. Ruri. The attendant had just informed him that a message had arrived for him. Mr. Ruri asked what was written there, and the attendant replied that Marquis Fereshte was looking for a mentor. What did Ruri ask again, without looking up from his book? The servant explained that the Marquis wanted his daughter to study magic. Everyone knew who he was talking about, the one who was called the Saint of the Fereshte family. The attendant offered to send a mid-level mage to her, but Ruri said no. He magically took the message into his hands. Ruri said that he would go to them himself. This caused extreme amazement in his interlocutor, who could not believe that the gentleman himself would go. At this time, Diana sat and thought, trying to imagine who her father would send. All her letters were monitored, so it was necessary to write something ordinary, like a greeting. The magic and alchemy that Diana learned as a child helped her greatly. She gave up practicing magic because she got married. But now, thinking about the past, Diana realized that she needed to study everything thoroughly from the very beginning. "There's someone there!" Diana called out, and the maids heard her voice from the corridor. The maid entered the room, yawning desperately. She pretended to be waiting devotedly for orders. Diana told me to tell Alice and Catherine at once that she invited them both to tea. The maid thought that it did not look like the same person was standing in front of her as yesterday. Diana asked why the maid did not answer her. Did she really dare to go against the words of the Duchess? "No," the maid cried out and promised to return quickly. Soon the table was set for tea. Diana told Alice, who had arrived, that unfortunately she could not see, but Alice remarked that the Duchess should get used to it by now. Diana thanked her companion for these words. Alice came from the family of Viscount Blair. She was Diana's closest childhood friend. When Alice moved into the mansion as a family doctor, both girls jumped for joy. Now Diana thought they were just being fools. "Mommy, I'm here," Diana heard Catherine's voice. Diana wondered how it was that Alice had dared to make her daughter a servant and her own child a duke's daughter. "Catherine," Diana exclaimed with joyful display. She jumped up and pulled the tablecloth with an awkward movement. The teapot tipped over, spilling tea all around it. "Oh, it's hot," cried Alice. Catherine looked at Diana with concern. "Mom, you burned the doctor," she shouted accusingly. Diana explained this by saying that she still couldn't get used to the fact that she couldn't see anything. Alice angrily thought that Diana was crazy, but she assured her out loud that everything was fine. Alice stood up, saying that she should go and treat the burns. Diana let her go. He and Catherine were left alone at the table, not counting the maids who were doing their work nearby. Diana told Catherine that she had a favor to ask of the girl. She asked her to help her get ready every morning. Catherine wondered why she should do this, since Diana had maids for such tasks. Diana said she just wanted her daughter to read her a book every morning in her beautiful canary-like voice, because it couldn't be difficult for her to do that for her mother. Moreover, Diana gave her eyes to Catherine. The girl thought that the Duchess was really annoying her, but out loud she called her mom and said that she would do everything. She said she wanted to help her. Diana replied that then they would see each other tomorrow morning. Alice hurried to the Duke to find comfort in his arms. She told him that her leg still hurt because of Diana's clumsiness, and Calypso asked how much it hurt. He asked if he needed to look at the damage. The Duke leaned towards Alice's skirts, who tried to object because the Duchess could come here at any moment. But Calypso did not think that Diana would appear here. There was no need to worry. And yet, Diana suddenly appeared on the threshold of this very room and addressed her dear husband. Calypso asked what she was doing here. Usually she never came to his office. She was afraid that she would disturb him. He thought that suddenly she noticed something. Diana sat down on the sofa next to the Duke and, sobbing, reported that the maids were ignoring her, constantly whispering that she had become a blind archduchess. She said she couldn't do it anymore. Diana announced that she would fire them all, which caused outrage in Alice, who had worked so hard to select them all. But the Duke did not allow his mistress to say out loud what she thought. Alice stood up to leave, thinking only the worst about Diana. Alice left the office feeling upset. Diana asked her husband to return to the mansion those servants whom she had previously hired herself. Calypso objected that he had already explained that some people needed labor. Diana replied that she would then send a letter to the Marquise. "Wait," said Calypso, looking at Diana. This woman looked exactly like her father, the Marquis. Calypso could not get used to it, could not love her. The Marquise's power could be compared to that of the Emperor, so the Duke took his daughter as his wife. There was no other reason. Luckily, stupid Diana was quite useful. After the wedding, quite a few donations came from her family. Looking at all these funds, Calypso understood that he would not go broke and would even be able to start a new business. But this also had its dark sides. For example, memories of that conversation with the Marquis. The Marquis dared to tell Calypso exactly what he should do. But the Duke wanted to seize the influence of a powerful family, and not at all the interference of an arrogant old man in his affairs. It was impossible to allow the Marquis to find out about everything that was happening between them now. He asked Diana if it would be enough for him to bring Shane and Milan back to the mansion. Diana threw herself on her husband's neck in gratitude. Great, she thought. This is where it all begins. For the time being, Diana had to lead a rather secluded life. She finished reading books at a very late hour. No one called her, no one was interested in her, even at such a time. Apparently, no one cared at all whether she was starving here or not, but it didn't matter that much to her either. Diana thought that she would fire all the staff tomorrow anyway. Even before her rebirth, she often remained hungry. Diana stood in her room in silence and darkness. She looked out the window and could see the full moon shining over the mountains. Suddenly, Diana felt some unusual foreign presence. She couldn't understand why such a strange and strong wind had suddenly arisen. "Ouch!" Diana cried, staggering on her heels. "Oh, I didn't expect that!" She heard a completely unexpected voice. A tall man with long red hair supported Diana by the shoulders and said that he found her beautiful. He did not expect his student to be like this. He said he was glad to meet him, but Diana didn't understand what this man was doing on her balcony in the moonlight. Diana asked him who he was. The stranger replied that he was the next candidate for the master of the magic tower, sent here by Diana's father. Diana began to guess who it was, and the stranger confirmed that he would become her teacher. Diana thought that her father had gone a little overboard in fulfilling her request, but it was no longer possible to turn back and dissuade him. She didn't even notice that a gust of wind had torn the veil from her face. The stranger handed it to her and asked if it was hers and why Diana was wearing it. She replied that she had become blind due to an accident, but the magician did not believe her. He said it was very strange. Diana realized that she might not be able to deceive the wizard. The magician suddenly said that he was joking. He himself seemed very strange, but it was still good that he didn't expose her. The stranger helped her put on her veil. Diana said that she could do it herself and then asked if she should call him teacher, to which the magician replied that she could call him whatever she liked. The stranger said his name was Louerie de Constantine. "Okay," said Diana, "she will call him Louerie." The magician suggested that the lesson be held once a week at noon, and he himself would come to the castle when the time came. "As you noticed, I walk poorly," he said, and ordered not to meet him. He offered to do everything so that she would be comfortable. Diana asked if it was true that wizards did not adhere to formalities, and the magician asked if she did not like it. Diana laughed and said that on the contrary, it was good and convenient for her. She will be looking forward to her first lesson. Suddenly, Diana grabbed her head, and the magician asked her what happened, calling her sister. Diana only thought that everything was starting from the very beginning. It was as if she heard someone saying it in her head, but she couldn't figure out what kind of voice it was. Above, a huge full moon stood alone. One of the maids who had returned to serve Diana, bursting into tears, said that this could not be. The second asked how this could happen. Diana explained that it was, of course, hard to believe, but that was exactly how things were. She explained to Milan and Shane that everything she had just told them was the pure truth. One of the girls asked what Her Highness was planning to do. Diana firmly stated that she intended to take revenge. She was going to take revenge on these animals in any way possible. Milan rushed closer to the lady and Shine called out to her. Milan fell to her knees in front of Diana and addressed her. She said it must have been hard for her to cope with all this alone. Milan assured that they would dedicate their entire lives to serving Her Highness. They would definitely help their mistress. Shine also knelt down. Both girls assured that they would do whatever the Duchess ordered them to do. Diana thanked both girls. She asked if she could ask them for something. When all the maids had gathered in the hall of the mansion, Diana congratulated them on the start of their work in the Duke's house. She handed out purses to the girls, who looked at them in surprise. Diana asked if everyone had received their wallets. She told the maids to open them. There was a month's salary in there. The girls opened their wallets and examined the contents. There were jewels there. It was surprising that this was a salary, unless it was a year's salary. Diana said that as the mistress of the house, she promises them this. She explained that she would respect and value those who would work in the house from today onwards more than anyone else. As are the jewels in these purses, Diana said. But there was something else important she was going to tell them. The glittering stones scattered dropped by Diana. She stepped decisively with her heel, causing shards of glass to spray out. "Just as long as you keep your head down," Diana said. "Don't betray me," she said. They all had to remember that they had only one mistress. That was Diana El Ernst. "Yes, Your Highness," all those present readily responded. Diana looked at these people with satisfaction from under her veil. Accompanied by her trusted maids, Diana walked through her domain. "Your Highness," a voice reached her. In front of her were the maids with a bag, and one of them fell to her knees in front of Diana to ask why she was leaving them, whether they had done something wrong. Clutching her skirt, the girl tearfully begged to be taken back into service. "Move away!" shouted one of the girls Diana had taken into service, and she blocked the way, standing with a sword and shielding Diana. "How dare you!" she cried. That night, Diana asked Milan and Shane to listen to her carefully. First, she needed to find servants who would work in the house. She planned to fire all the maids who were currently working in the house, and she also wanted them to find her a night girl. This surprised Shane, and she asked if it was possible to ask the owner to fulfill this wish. Diana explained that this girl must be an unregistered knight. She would have to wear a maid's clothes. She will be entrusted with a very important job. Now, a night girl named Valinda was protecting Diana with a sword in her hand, but the girls who were begging for their jobs back didn't seem to even understand what exactly they had done wrong. They simply betrayed Diana, sided with Alice for just a few pennies, and now they thought it was possible to simply ask for forgiveness. Diana will never let them in here again. Alice also watched this scene, but from afar. She thought that she had told all these girls to behave decently, but they had made mistakes, and now they looked so pathetic. Alice just felt that something was wrong. Thus began a new period of life in the ducal mansion. Of all the staff, the Duchess left only one servant, Julia. Diana explained that Julia might know a lot about Alice's plans, so now she needed to be watched closely. Then she asked Milan what about her request. Milan replied that nothing had yet been found out about her real daughter. As Diana described, the skinny 15-year-old girl with hands as rough as wood was not found in the house, just in case Milan is searching throughout the entire territory of the duchy. Diana told us to keep looking. She couldn't understand at all where Alice was hiding her daughter. Alice, who deprived her of her sight, was going to deprive her of her title and life. Diana told Shane to bring Catherine to her. The maid went to fetch the girl, but Catherine was outraged that she was being called again. Shine explained that Her Highness would like to read, and Catherine stated that she had already come for it that morning. Shine noticed that it was already noon and asked to be forgiven. Catherine believed that if she didn't see anything, then let Diana live in silence. As soon as her mother became a duchess, everything would be different. Then Diana would simply become nothing at all. The girl angrily hit the objects on her desk with her palm, and they scattered. The teapot and cups flew off the table, breaking into pieces. Catherine stamped her foot in a blue slipper. "Hey, come out!" she shouted and kicked the closet door. A frightened girl with golden hair appeared from behind him and asked why Catherine had called her. Catherine demanded that she come out faster and grabbed her by the hair. Catherine pushed the girl towards the shards to get her to clean them up. She told me to leave it clean when she returned. Catherine named the girl Azel and asked if she understood everything that was entrusted to her. "Mother," said Catherine, entering the room of the Duchess, who was drinking tea, and on the table near her lay whole stacks of books. "It's me," the girl said from the doorway. Diana sternly informed her that she was late. Catherine apologized and explained that she had completely forgotten, and Diana thought that this girl thought that she could do anything and would be forgiven for anything. Catherine added that she fell asleep while reading the book, but her mother would forgive her for that. Diana replied that whatever the reason, she was still late. Apparently, she still didn't know that it was a lady's duty to never be late. Catherine replied that she knew that. She didn't understand what had changed in Diana. Diana strictly told the girl not to be late next time. Then she pointed to the tea table and explained that these were the books they would have to read today. There were a lot of them. Diana noted that she could no longer read books herself, so she would be very happy if her daughter helped her, to which Catherine objected that the Duchess had maids for this purpose. Diana replied that she really enjoyed listening to her daughter's voice, so she could do it for her mother's sake, and the girl did not dare to object anymore. She started reading the first book and put it aside only after an hour. Crossing her arms over her chest, Catherine said that her throat was starting to hurt really badly from reading aloud for so long. Diana thought that the girl had always been impatient, but she never told her about it because she loved her before. Everything happened much faster than Diana imagined. She said that Catherine was already 15, and it seemed that she had raised her too weak. Diana said that tomorrow, Sawyer's son from the Duchy of Eiburg will arrive. The meeting will need to be cancelled. This will be Catherine's punishment. The girl jumped up in extreme indignation. She could not believe that Diana was talking about this. Diana asked thoughtfully how she could introduce a lady to the Duke's son when that lady did not even fulfill her obligations to her own family. The Duke's son meant so much to Catherine that she simply radiated waves of anger towards Diana. She had been looking forward to this day so much. She was going to spend time alone with her new acquaintance. Her father and mother had no connection with the Duchy of Eiburg, and only Diana could help her, so now Catherine burst into tears. Besides, she heard that they might get married if she had known in advance. She would have tolerated Diana's whims a little longer. Diana looked at her with a gentle smile and said that if the girl obeyed her, she would later make a new appointment with the Duke's son. "True?" Catherine asked incredulously, and Diana replied that yes, because she loved her. Catherine promised that she would not be late anymore and would read books to her mother. "Okay," Diana replied, thinking that this girl was completely blinded by greed. It was completely easy for her to control, so she picked up the book again to read on. That day, the sun rose over the mansion. This was the very important day that Diana had been waiting for. She was supposed to start magic lessons today, as Valinda reminded her. The night girl was going to guard the entrance to the garden. The Duchess could call her if she needed anything. Taking her cane, Diana went out into the garden. She hoped that there was enough space here for studying. Diana looked at her watch. It was almost time. The magician promised to appear when the time came. He said that they would do everything as it was convenient for her. Diana wondered if the teacher would suddenly appear just like last time. Now she wouldn't be afraid of him anymore, like then. The clock hand has reached the required point. The magician appeared at that very moment in the glow of the flames. "Hello, sister," he said to Diana. He stood very close to the woman. Diana greeted him. Luri asked how she was doing and said that he himself could not wait for this day to come. The magician smiled and said that she was his first student and it was an honor. Diana chuckled. She couldn't help but agree with his words. "Well," said Luri, "let's begin our lesson. Magic, attack, defense, or oppression," Luri listed, offering Diana to choose whatever she wanted. Diana thought, trying to remember the last time she used magic. Finally, she replied that she wanted to relearn the basics, and Luri said that was good, told Diana to straighten her shoulders, and they would begin to learn slowly. At first, Luery suggested learning to release energy. It felt like the flame was dancing right in the palm of my hand. Luery had a knack for handling fire and asked if Diana knew that each energy had different properties. Fire, water, ice, earth, wind, and a sixth element, you could use magic that suited the properties. Luery said that he belonged to fire, and then asked what element Diana had. She replied that she had ice. "Let's try," said the magician. Diana was very scared to start this. She tried it. She didn't think it would be this bad. "Little sister," said the magician and took Diana by the wrist. He told her to relax her hands and concentrate to draw out the magic, opening her hand as soon as she felt the power in her fingertips. Diana closed her eyes, trying to feel it. She just needed to focus, concentrate, and gather the power of magic from your fingertips. Diana didn't know that her attempts were being secretly observed. The Duke stood in the shadows and looked at Diana. Diana was summoning ice magic, and there was a man standing next to her who was explaining something to her. Diana opened her eyes and saw the result of her efforts. Finally, it worked. She turned to the stranger with a triumphant smile. He took her hands and said that she was doing well. It was then that Calypso came out into the open, finding his wife in this ambiguous situation. The Duke's face was stern. "Darling," he said, looking at his wife. He asked who was next to her, and Diana explained that it was Luery, her magic teacher. "Magic," Calypso repeated, puzzled. Diana reminded the Duke that she had recently gone blind and could no longer read books to learn magic. This made Calypso think. The Duke and the magician's gazes met. Diana thought it was funny because the Duke had no right to be jealous of her after everything. After all, he himself had an affair with her companion. "Luery," Diana called out to her mentor. She introduced him to her husband, Calypso, and the men greeted each other. The Duke thought that there was not a drop of politeness in the stranger, and the magician directly stated that Calypso was about to burn a hole in him with her gaze. Catherine was also watching the proceedings from her position near the flower arrangement. The girl came closer and asked what Mom and Dad were doing here. Diana noticed that Catherine's voice seemed hoarse from reading aloud every day, and she told the girl to say hello to the magician too. Diana said that this stranger was her magic teacher. Catherine indifferently replied that she didn't care. "Your Highness," the girl heard with surprise. Luery noticed that the girl was strangely not like her mother. Calypso said it was a very rude remark, but Luery was puzzled and said he didn't see anything wrong, he was just telling it like it was. Diana replied that Catherine looked like her husband. Luery noted that in that case it was even stranger to see something rude in what he had just said. Calypso stated that no matter what kind of magician Luery was, he just smirked in response and said that even so. In an instant, he summoned a firebird. Calypso asked what he was doing, and Luery replied that he had the manners and status of a nobleman. He reminded his interlocutor that this had no significance for the Magic Tower. It was a power beyond human capabilities. The Magic Tower was a place where only those with magical talent could enter. It was a society based on ability rather than status. Mr. Luery, who was an authority in the tower, found Calypso funny. The Duke seemed to sense it too. He made an excuse that he still had a lot of things to do today, so now he needed to leave, and he ordered Catherine to follow him. It seems that magic was something truly terrible. Diana told Catherine to stay late, although the girl did not understand why she should do this. Diana had one request for Luery. She wanted magic lessons to be held for her daughter as well. "Magic?" Catherine asked, slightly hesitantly. Diana replied that magical abilities are passed down through generations. In the human world, magical abilities are given randomly. They can manifest in anyone, regardless of origin. So magical abilities can be found in both slaves and members of the royal family, of course. If a parent has magical power, it is passed on to the child by inheritance. Catherine looked at Diana. For some reason, she became worried. Was she afraid that she would find out that she was not her daughter? The girl said that she was not interested in magic at all, and Diana said that magic could be very useful if you learned it. Diana assured that she was not telling her daughter to go to the Magic Tower or become an imperial magician, but it was all for the sake of her future. She reminded the girl that she was the only daughter of Archduke Ernst. If in the future she inherited her father's title, then magic would be very useful to her. Diana noted that this would also help Catherine meet Prince Sawyer, which the girl had not forgotten. Catherine immediately assured that she would study well. Did she know anything about whether there are magical abilities? Luery agreed to fulfill Diana's request, and she thanked him and happily said that she and Catherine would begin studying next week. He added, of course, that he would like to conduct classes in private. He felt sorry, but there was nothing he could do. "See you later," said the magician and disappeared into thin air. Diana looked after him and thought that he was such a nasty teacher. The sunset of this day has arrived. Diana, who returned to the mansion, was met by Alice. She asked where Her Highness had been all this time. Alice couldn't ignore the Duchess because of the people looking at them. Diana replied that she was in the garden because she had invited a teacher there who would teach her magic. But then another interesting thing happened. Diana pressed her hand to her cheek and noticed that she had never thought before that Calypso was so jealous. Alice asked what this meant, and Diana replied that she had introduced her teacher to the Duke, but his voice was very angry. Alice said that this simply couldn't be. Most likely Her Highness simply mixed something up and misunderstood him. Diana countered that the Duke and her teacher even argued a little. She said she wished she could see him again. Diana was a little tired, so she was going to leave now, leaving Alice completely confused. Alice tried to understand what Diana was talking about. Because Calypso belonged only to her, he would never be jealous of the one who was his official wife. Wait, Alice? Diana thought at this time. She was going to take away everything she had from her former friend. A little later, Alice knocked on the locked door. She said her name. She heard that Her Highness was not feeling well, and heard that she could come in. Alice entered and closed the door behind her. She asked what was wrong with Catherine's voice, whether she had caught a cold. The girl explained that Diana simply made him read to her for half a day. She had to do this every day. Alice did not understand what it was and why. The girl complained that Diana canceled a meeting with Prince Sawyer and scolded her. Alice thought that this crazy Diana had first changed all the maids, and now she dared to touch her daughter. Catherine said that she seemed to have become even more sensitive since she went blind. Alice suggested that she had simply gone mad. "Yes," Catherine answered and said that there was something important. The girl said that from now on she would study magic with Diana. "What?" cried Alice. She could not believe what Catherine had said. Her voice echoed loudly throughout the room. She asked again if the girl was serious when she said that she would now learn magic, and Catherine replied that she was, since she too might have abilities. Covering her face with her hand, Lisa groaned that her daughter couldn't possibly have any magical abilities, and Catherine reminded her that she was an outstanding doctor and suggested that she try to do something about it. Alice explained that she would not be able to deceive the magicians anyway if Catherine showed her unclear talent. It would only attract suspicion to herself. Catherine screamed, asking what she should do then, since she could no longer refuse anything. Alice looked at her daughter thoughtfully. Then they both turned to the bookcase. "There is a way," Alice suddenly said. They called for a girl servant with golden hair, who stammered in fear that she wanted to know why she was called. Catherine rudely replied that since she had called, the servant should have come silently and not dared to object to her. Catherine thought about what happened 5 years ago. Then the girl found Alice in the arms of her own father. She thought that this woman was a close friend of her mother, whom she then believed to be Diana. Alice fell to her knees in front of the girl, and Catherine thought that she was just an ordinary, impudent doctor. She screamed that she would tell her mother. But then Alice screamed that Catherine was actually her daughter, not Diana's. This made the girl shut up. She looked at her father, and he confirmed Alice's words. Catherine screamed that this simply couldn't be happening. Alice stood up, walked up to her, and put her hands on her shoulders. She said that if society suddenly found out that she was not Diana's biological daughter, nothing good would happen to her. Diana, who adored her and considered her her sweet daughter. Diana will turn away from her when she finds out that dirty and low blood flows in her veins. Alice realized that the girl had realized everything and praised her for her intelligence. Then she asked who Diana's real daughter was. Alice said that this girl grows up with orphans, very low. Catherine was meant to be as valuable and special as this child was low. Catherine was destined to become a real duchess. These words warmed her heart. She even repeated them after Alice. Now, 5 years later, he and his mother had another problem to solve. The girl from behind the closet asked again what they meant when they talked about her and magic. She reminded that she was just a city girl, she couldn't use magic. Alice said that she would call an experienced magician, so she just needs to try. She will have to help Her Highness the Duchess. The girl asked whether she, like Her Highness the Duchess, should simply pretend. Catherine gave the girl a stinging slap. She said that the maid was chatting a lot today. She was, after all, the lowest of the low, and no one gave her the right to ask so many unnecessary questions. Alice told Catherine that this was enough. If she made a mistake somewhere, she would not be able to learn magic. "I don't want to see you. Get out!" Catherine screamed. Alice took her daughter's hands in hers and said that she would show her the teacher tomorrow, and therefore she should not take everything too close to heart. She reminded the girl that the real Duchess is Catherine and always will be, and Catherine agreed with her. The next day, Diana stood on the balcony of her room. She thought the weather was very nice, and now on such a day it was worth practicing magic. Diana closed her eyes, stretched out her hand, and tried to concentrate. She didn't know that somewhere, with exactly the same gesture, a servant girl was holding out her hand in front of her. The magician explained to Alice that the girl had abilities, but they had not yet been defined. He said it was strange. Even if the mana was very weak, it should have released at least a small charge. "It seems this child won't be suitable after all." Alice chuckled. It was her hidden mockery of Diana. The Duchess's own daughter was completely useless anyway. Alice told the attendant that they didn't need any extraordinary magic. Until next week, the girl only needed to be taught how to release magic. Alice relied on the servant in this, and he promised to try. Ice crystals swirled in the sunlight near the balcony. Diana wondered what Catherine would do next. She was so selfish, even though she had not a grain of talent. Diana thought that this would all be interesting. Her eyes lit up as she thought about all this. Talent, she thought. This child will be like her. She remembered squeezing her hands in her last moments. Ice flows circled around the balcony. Diana thought about her sweet daughter, whom she would definitely find. "Your Highness," she suddenly heard a voice. The maid said that she had brought lunch. Diana allowed her to come in. Milana set the table for the meal. Diana thanked her and sat down to dinner. Unfortunately, she had no appetite at all. Suddenly, Diana noticed something. She scooped up a spoonful of soup, but didn't have time to bring it to her mouth. The red hair of her magician teacher was visible outside the window. Diana realized that it seemed like this man was here. "Sister, it's me," said Lueri and asked to open the window for him. He said that he had come for extra classes. Last time they had very little time, and besides they were constantly interrupted. Diana thanked him for his attention. She asked if the magician had already had lunch. Lueri replied that not yet. He asked if everything was okay, since he had come to teach her. Diana explained that she was simply inviting him to share a meal with her, and also said that there were many things she would like to know from him. They sat down at the table. Diana said that the food had just been prepared, so it was still hot. Lueri said it looked delicious. The food that stood on the table in front of them looked very appetizing and was served elegantly. The room was very quiet. They ate in silence. Diana had previously thought that mages behaved more freely during meals, but his table manners were simply impeccable. It seemed as if they were having dinner at the palace. Diana even asked if Lueri even ate. She noticed that she had not heard a sound from him. The magician explained that he had been trained very strictly. Lueri said he grew up in an orphanage and found his parents later. Diana knew she shouldn't have asked him about something like that, so she expressed her joy that he had managed to find his family. Lueri said his life at the shelter wasn't all that bad, thanks to someone. Diana looked at the magician and thought that his voice was too sad for such words. And now he looked very gloomy. One might assume that this whole time had been extremely difficult for him. A couple of days later, the weather was not so good, but they still went out into the garden. "Mama, I'm back," said Catherine, coming up to her with Alice, and Diana urged her to come closer. Lueri greeted the young lady, and then he asked who the old witch was next to her. Alice indignantly replied that she was not an old witch. She said that she was the personal healer of the Grand Archduke. She heard that the young lady would also be learning magic and came to see. She asked Diana if she would be allowed to do so, and Diana agreed. Diana said that Alice was her best friend, and therefore she could watch as much as she wanted. Diana herself was going to see what she was capable of. She hoped that her rival friend was prepared. Today's lesson has begun. Lueri suggested testing the young lady first to determine her magical potential. Catherine looked at the adults around her with confidence. A girl with golden hair watched them from the room's window. She hid behind the curtain and no one could see her. Alice explained to her what she should do. They had already tried it several times. Then she told Catherine to get ready. The servant girl created ice crystals with her magic. "Excellent," Alice approved, and Catherine said that she thought it turned out very well. Alice said that the lesson would start soon. She was going to accompany Catherine, and the girl said okay, but immediately called Alice Mom, and only then corrected herself and called her a doctor. Catherine told Azel, the servant girl, to try harder this time and make sure to do everything right. "Yes, my lady," Azel answered her. She believed she could do it. Now Catherine was standing on the lawn, and the mentor was telling her that if she had mana, she would feel the energy flowing inside her. He asked if she could feel it, and Catherine said of course, but Lueri wasn't so sure. He told the girl to try to concentrate the energy in her hands. He assumed that her element should definitely be ice. "I understand," said Catherine, and thought that she would be able to do it because that commoner would simply cast a spell for her. Catherine extended her hand and took a few steps across the lawn. Her open palm supposedly summoned magical power. Alice watched her daughter's actions with alarm. "This can't be," Catherine cried. Diana asked what happened, what about the results, and Lueri just sighed at that. He said that the young lady had failed. Alice asked that her ladyship give the girl another chance. She suggested that Catherine failed because she was too nervous. Catherine confirmed this and asked to let her try again. Lueri noted that there was no point in this. No matter how many times she tried, the results would be the same. Lueri believed that the girl had no mana at all. "No way," Diana said. She knew that magic manifested itself more easily in youth, and besides it was passed down through heredity. "It was so strange," Diana said, "because Catherine was her daughter." Lueri agreed with her and said that he had never seen anything like it before. Catherine thought angrily about the commoner who dared to humiliate her in such a public manner. The girl looked at the window with hatred. Somewhere there must be hiding the one who had let her down so much. Diana told Catherine that there was nothing that could be done. "Now the girl will have to learn magic alone." Catherine screamed that this was some kind of mistake. The girl tried to argue, but Diana did not let her continue. She approached the girl and said that an honest lady should understand that she may not be able to do something. The girl looked into Diana's face. Then she screamed that she hated them all and ran away. Alice tried to call out to her. Diana, however, thought at that time that there was no need to be so upset, because things would only get worse. Catherine ran down the corridor and thought that this commoner had destroyed everything. She thought about Sir Sawyer. In order to at least get closer to him, it was necessary to please Diana, to become good for her. There was only one thought running through Catherine's head, and it was about Azel. Catherine screamed that she would kill her. She opened the door to the room. Catherine walked in and looked at the green curtain fluttering in the wind. Alice said she thought the young lady was deeply disappointed. Diana thought she was the only one here who had the right to feel disappointed, all her noise and whining, and in the end she turned out to be nothing more than an empty shell. Diana sighed and said that she was indeed a little ashamed. It would be better if her daughter was like her. Lueri agreed, and noted that this was true, especially if it was a member of the Fereshta family. Lueri had an idea of who the girl looked like most. He quite unceremoniously pointed his finger at Alice and said that Catherine looked like her. With a laugh, Diana explained to Lueri that she and Alice were the same age, and that Catherine probably imitated Alice because they were so close. She even asked Alice if she thought that was true. Alice answered in the affirmative and said that she would go check on the girl. Diana noted with approval that Alice was the only one who was truly worried about her and Catherine. She asked her companion to calm the girl down, and Lueri suggested that they begin their lesson with Diana for now. Alice came into Catherine's room. The girl screamed that Azel had run away. "That's all," said Alice. "What?" she asked. "How?" she said. Alice realized that the girl had broken down the door and run away. Catherine was beside herself with rage. Alice thought that it couldn't be. The girl had been hiding her powers all this time. They needed to find her immediately. Diana was passionate about magic, mastering new magic. But she thought about what if she could see her daughter again. "Your Highness," the maids called out as they ran up to her. She asked them what happened. Sheen whispered to her about the head maid, Julia. She just secretly left the estate. Diana said that she had not given her any instructions, so her departure looked very strange. Shane asked what they should do. Julia was Alice's only remaining ally, and it was likely that she was acting on her orders. And finally the time has come. Diana said that she hadn't had tea with Julia for so long. The table was set, and she told the returning maid to come in. Julia asked if Her Highness had called. She wanted to know why. Diana replied that she just wanted to talk to her. But first, she suggested drinking some tea. It was with chamomile. It is an excellent remedy for fatigue. Julia obediently took the cup and began to drink tea. Suddenly she dropped it and the tea spilled all around. She exclaimed that something was wrong with this tea. "Where is my daughter?" Diana asked her sternly. Julia asked with concern in her eyes what exactly the lady was talking about, as if hoping for a saving ambiguity, but then added that she knew exactly what they were talking about now and was sure that she understood the hint. Julia coughed violently, as if the tea she had swallowed had gone down the wrong way, but Diana calmly and coolly explained that even if she spat out all the tea, it would not help her. The potion was too strong. She said that even a tiny drop of this drink was enough to bring forth the truth, because it was a truth serum. Diana was the only one in the estate who could make it. It was an alchemical potion created with magic. Diana, frowning, leaned closer to the trembling maid and asked directly, without beating around the bush, where her daughter was. Julia, swallowing hard and stumbling over every other word, admitted that her daughter had run away from the mansion. She added that training new maids in this place was always difficult, and Lady Alice had not shared any important details lately. But that time, Lady Alice came to her herself. She reported that Azel had run away. She reported that Azel, the same girl they had hidden for so long, had used magic to escape from the estate. Alice ordered to return it, no matter how, but it had to be done. With these words, she handed Julia a heavy bag clicking with coins and ordered her to begin searching immediately. Julia understood everything without words and solemnly promised to begin the search that very minute, without wasting a second. She worked as a maid in Catherine's room. This girl was bullied every day without mercy. Perhaps Azel simply couldn't bear it any longer and decided to escape, despite all the dangers. "This is just ridiculous," Diana muttered. She insistently demanded that Julia describe what the girl looked like. Julia, not without hesitation, answered that the girl had light, almost golden hair. This hair was remarkably similar to Diana's own golden locks, like a reflection. She also had emerald green eyes, also exactly the same as Diana's. Diana screamed that Julia had known all along and still chose the other side, but Julia suddenly laughed, a long, loud, and malicious laugh that echoed in the walls. She exclaimed that it was not every day that one got to witness such a tragic story. She thought it was delightful. Her laughter, crazy and jubilant, literally drove Diana to despair and pain. Meanwhile, the girl ran through the forest in panic, stepping right into cold and deep puddles in her light shoes. She tripped, lost her balance, and fell straight into the mud, soaking wet. She lay there, breathing heavily, and thought that she could no longer even move, so great was her exhaustion. And suddenly she heard footsteps. Someone was walking straight towards her, and she turned around with difficulty at the sound. It was a tall man in a long cloak with a hood that completely hid his face. "It's so funny," Julia told Diana, throwing up her hands. Julia stated that this is exactly why she loves Lady Alice so much. She is cruel and ruthless. "Belinda," Diana called to the night girl. She ordered that Julia be killed without delay. Belinda was surprised, and Diana asked her. Diana burst into tears and asked to remove this devil from her sight. That evening a storm raged outside the window. The rain lashed the glass with such force that the garden was barely visible. The maids silently cleaned the room and wiped the blood from the floor. The efforts of the cleaners hid the marks on the floor. While the maids were tidying up the room, Diana stood at the window, looking out into the rain, lost in her thoughts, full of pain and regret. Shane and Milan exchanged glances. Exchanging gestures, their mistress looked completely different than usual. Diana looked completely different from herself. This is the first time, Diana thought. She had never killed anyone before. It was pouring rain, and the blossoming roses in the garden were getting wet, and the room was covered in blood. Diana felt horror at what had happened and at herself, because she had crossed the line beyond which there was no forgiveness. But in this estate she could not afford weakness. Any mistake could be fatal. There was still dirt in the room that needed to be removed immediately to erase the traces of the tragedy. Diana asked Milan to find Catherine and bring her to the reception room for a talk. It was necessary to tell the girl to wait. It was really important and urgent. At this time, the girl with golden hair was calling on her magical powers. She attacked a sword-wielding stranger in a cloak. So far, the girl was clearly weaker than her opponent. The attacker's face was completely hidden by a hood, and the girl could not understand who it was. The girl couldn't understand who it was. Had they already sent someone from the estate? Then the girl realized that she seemed to have already used up all her mana. It was bad. The realization that her mana was gone came suddenly. She collapsed to the ground, losing her strength. The large house they approached stood on a remote path, covered by gray clouds and pouring rain. The woman in the green dress carefully covered the already sleeping children with a blanket, not expecting guests. But then there was a loud and decisive knock on the door. The woman in the green dress opened the door and asked what brought the unexpected visitor here. The man in the hooded cloak held the girl in his arms and said that he needed to bring her here. The woman looked at them carefully and noticed that the girl was in a terrible state. She said that first you need to follow her. At the same time, Diana was restlessly pacing the corridors of her mansion, clenching her fingers into fists. Just think, all this time her daughter lived right here, being a servant in Catherine's chambers. She saw some kind of energetic glow. It was probably the mana with which Diana opened the door. With this mana, Diana opened a secret door leading into a dark, dusty room. Everything here was so dirty, so squalid, so covered in cobwebs that it was impossible to imagine that anyone lived here. Diana guessed that it was Alice who built this room, a secret dungeon, where she kept the child, who needed to be hidden from the too attentive eyes of strangers. On the floor stood a dirty bowl with stale and moldy bread, exactly the same as the one the girl had once brought her. The girl brought her this kind of bread in that past life. Diana sank to the floor and covered her face with her hands. It was almost physically painful for her to imagine how her daughter suffered here. Even when she was in so much pain herself, that girl still selflessly brought her bread to Diana. She took care of the one whom no one cared about. Diana cried bitterly, tears rolling down her cheeks. She did not recognize her daughter, and now she could hardly fix it. Meanwhile, Catherine was sitting on the sofa in Diana's room, waiting for the meeting. "You're already here," she said with slight irritation as Diana entered. Diana came closer and said that she had made the girl wait too long. "Catherine," Diana said almost solemnly. She had been thinking for some time about appointing a new teacher of magic for private instruction. After all, if Catherine was her daughter, her lack of magic was very strange. Lueri must have made a mistake when he tested her for magical energy. Catherine replied that she only wanted to marry young Master Sawyer as soon as possible. She was very busy learning the etiquette for her debut as a beautiful girl. She had absolutely no time to practice magic. "Catherine," Diana said, and suggested that she look at her mother. It is necessary to study magic at an early age so that she does not regret it later. She really didn't want Catherine to have the same regrets in the future. She didn't tell her that she actually wanted this girl to suffer twice as much as her real daughter. "Well," said Catherine. She was clearly feeling impatient after sitting there for such a long time. Catherine asked if she could go since they were already finished. The girl walked away, looking back with a displeased expression. Diana did not look after her. She again hid her face under the veil, concealing her apparent blindness. "Then take care of yourself, Mother," said Catherine, walking away down the corridor of the mansion. Diana looked at what she had brought from her daughter's closet, an object wrapped in an old blanket. It was probably a girl's diary, a neat little book with a picture on the cover. "It can't be," thought Diana, opening the first pages with trepidation and reading what was written on them. It turned out that the girl already knew everything. The orphan girl knew that the lady of this house was her biological mother, but she did not reveal her knowledge in any way. But Diana didn't recognize her, and loved someone else's child instead of her. The girl saw all this constantly. She could become disappointed in her stupid mother. It could be that this is precisely why she has now run away somewhere. Diana cried and asked for forgiveness. She promised that she would find the girl. It was just necessary to wait a little longer, to be patient just a little bit, for their meeting in this life to take place. Meanwhile, the girl was lying in bed. Her face was burning. She had a high fever. Alice thought that all this seemed very suspicious to her. She personally checked all the shelves and did not find what was supposed to be there. Now she demanded an explanation from the servants of the mansion and was going to find out the truth, no matter what the cost. Alice walked restlessly along the corridor, trying to find Julia. She had already gone to all the usual places and even looked into the empty room herself, but she did not find her faithful assistant anywhere. She frowned, thinking that the lack of news for several days was not at all accidental. Apparently something bad really happened to Julia during her last mission, when she went to look for that very girl. While Alice was absorbed in these disturbing thoughts, she was suddenly called out to. The voice belonged to Diana. The Duchess stood nearby, leaning on her cane, and next to her was one of the maids. Diana asked anxiously if everything was all right, explaining that the maid, Shane, had noticed that Alice's complexion was sickly pale, But Alice, quickly pulling herself together, hastened to retort that everything was fine and there was no reason to worry, and then asked where Her Highness was heading. Diana smiled and said that she had another magic lesson today to demonstrate her successes. She raised her hand and ice crystals shimmered above her palm. Alice grinned and with a hint of irony noted that she saw it. But before Diana could respond, something unexpected happened. One of the ice sparks she had created hissed and flew straight at Alice. Alice screamed and fell to the floor, and the blind Duchess jerked, gasped, and asked in fear what had happened. The maid quickly explained that perhaps a magical spark had accidentally bounced off and touched Lady Alice's dress. Diana frowned and said that this shouldn't be happening. She was sure she had everything under control. Alice threw a look at the Duchess in which poorly concealed anger was visible. The Duchess hastened to say that she was still a newcomer to magic and could make mistakes, and then asked anxiously if Alice had been hurt. Alice, barely containing her irritation, responded with feigned ease that she was fine. However, her hand involuntarily froze over the hem of her dress, in which a torn hole now gaped. She said coldly that she would go upstairs to change and formally wished the Duchess success in her magic studies. Diana regretfully asked to forgive her for this incident and added that Alice should be careful on the way. Alice, with one last sidelong glance over her shoulder, left. Diana also looked at her from under the bandage. She guessed where she would go now. Turning to Shane's maid, Diana told her to take the tray of tea and take it to Duke Calypso's office. That was exactly where the Duchess herself was now heading. When she approached, Calypso was just sorting through documents at his desk. He looked up from his papers when he heard Alice's voice. Alice entered quickly, without greeting anyone, and with an expression of indignation threw a piece of torn dress on the table. The Duke asked her what was the matter, and Alice, angry and all ablaze with indignation, said that he had no idea how many times this had already happened. Meanwhile, Diana was already in the next room. She told Sheen that she was entrusting this to her, and the maid agreed. With a table loaded with food, the maid set off to carry out the errand. She took the tea to Alice and then went out. The girl deliberately left the door slightly open, so Diana was able to quietly approach and remain unnoticed near the doorway, listening to what was happening inside. Alice was the first to speak again, demanding when everything would finally happen. Then, in a raised voice, she asked when the Duke intended to make her his lawful wife. Calypso calmly told her that Diana was still alive and asked her to wait a little longer. Alice couldn't help but scream, asking if he really wanted her to wait until Diana grew old and died. Calypso was clearly agitated and annoyed by this onslaught. He said that they would have to wait until the Marquis gave them something important. Diana wondered outside the door what it could be. Calypso said he needed money, that's why he married Diana, and Alice knows it too. The Duke assured his mistress that the Marquis had promised to give them the diamond mine as soon as Catherine made her debut. He again asked Alice to wait a little, and she apparently softened. She laid her head on his shoulder. Diana, standing on the other side of the door, smirked, and a whole picture began to form in her head. Now she understood much more. She remembered that on the very day she died, Catherine made her debut. It turned out that this whole monstrous story, betrayal, substitution, assassination attempts happened for the sake of her father's diamond mine. That's why they didn't kill her right away, because they still had to wait for the right moment. It was all for the sake of money. Diana's father did not even suspect that his beloved daughter and real granddaughter were dying. He joyfully celebrated the debut of the fake granddaughter and presented her with riches belonging to Diana. It was so disgusting that it was hard to even imagine. She quickly left the mansion, trying not to be noticed by anyone. She was almost running, her long golden hair flying behind her. Finding herself in a secluded part of the park, she leaned heavily against a tree, trying to catch her breath. Diana thought that she had guessed a lot, but now she realized that everything turned out to be even worse than she could have imagined. Everyone she once loved, everyone she believed in, turned out to be traitors. All that remained was bitterness and a caustic, joyless laughter from the life she had considered happy. She took her watch out of her pocket and looked at the dial. It was the very hour when magic lessons usually began. Lueri, her mentor, had already arrived at the appointed place, but to his surprise, he did not find Diana there. It was already time for the lesson, but for some reason Diana was not there. "Lueri, you're already here." Diana's voice sounded nearby, and the magician turned around. Diana apologized for keeping her mentor waiting. The magician looked at her with a question. He asked the Duchess what had happened and if she was okay. Diana replied that yes, of course, she thought she was just taking a short break. And at that moment, Lueri suddenly grabbed her hand. Lueri looked at Diana intently, and with a serious note in his voice asked her directly why she continued to pretend in front of him. He gently but insistently ordered her to turn to face him, as if he wanted to look into her soul. Not wanting to reveal his secret, Diana slightly shrugged her shoulders and answered in a restrained voice that there was no point in it, because she couldn't see anything anyway, so why look? Lueri said she could see everything. She still looked away, holding on to her mask, not daring to reveal herself even to someone who clearly knew the truth. But at that moment, an idea flashed through her mind, an insight that demanded immediate action. Diana realized that it was only possible to carry out her plans within the walls of her chambers, where no one could overhear or interrupt them. She pulled Lueri decisively after her, entered her room and slammed the door behind them to hide the conversation from prying ears. Diana pinned Lueri against the wall and asked him how he knew all this. He just grinned, as if he wasn't scared by this outburst, said that she was incredibly strong, but Diana wasn't going to stop. She didn't need compliments, but the truth. Diana wanted to know how the magician knew about her eyes, about what she could see. And, unable to bear the pretense any longer, she pulled off her blindfold and stared straight into his eyes, as if challenging him. Lueri froze for a moment, looking at her without answering. Then Diana continued, demanding an answer. If he knew everything, then why was he pretending? The magician looked away for a moment. His confidence seemed to waver. He hesitated. Then he said that he just liked Diana. Diana raised her eyebrows in surprise, and her gaze became wary. She tried to understand whether he was sincere now. He even liked her courage, everything that was in her. She asked coldly if he had allowed her to lie to him just because she liked him, her voice shaking as she asked him not to play with her like that anymore. The mage took a step back and said that he was actually acting on orders. He was hired by Diana's father, Marquis Fereshteh, and that was enough to protect her. He extended his hand to Diana and called her the saint of the Fereshteh family. Lueri said that not everyone can earn such a nickname, so he just believes in her. Diana looked closely at her mentor. She thought that perhaps the magician could help her with her request. Lueri, she said, tugging at the lapel of his robe. She asked if the magician could help her. On the table lay a letter in a black envelope with a seal in the form of flowers. Diana and Calypso sat opposite each other, and she asked why her dear husband had called her. Calypso replied that an invitation had been sent to her. Diana asked in surprise what other invitation they were talking about. The family of Duke Eibert was one of the most prestigious families in the capital and the center of high society. They are holding a special tea party, and the invitation to participate in it always comes at this time. These were very distinctive black envelopes that everyone knew, and Calypso knew this very well too. Diana thought that he was supposed to arrange Catherine's engagement, so he had to accept the Duke's proposal. But Diana was not sure that this would not create difficulties. Calypso said that he was worried about his dear wife. It was just like before, when he pretended to only care about Diana and then sent Alice instead. He was trying to get her to socialize with high society nobles, Diana thought, and then asked if that was true. Calypso said that he was afraid that if she went there without special need, she might be hurt, or her gentle name might be wounded by the gossip of all sorts of noblewomen. Diana replied to this that if she did not go, Catherine might be greatly disappointed after all. The girls still liked Lord Sawyer very much. Calypso did ask about sending Alice, which was good because she could be trusted. Several days passed after this conversation. A ceremonial carriage stopped near the mansion. It was drawn by white horses. Alice, in a luxurious light green dress, solemnly descended the stairs. She thought it was very generous of Diana to have had a dress made for her companion, especially for this tea party. It made Alice feel like a duchess already. She left the mansion, and Catherine and Calypso were already waiting for her near the carriage. "Miss Doctor," the girl called out to her, causing her to smile. Catherine was very happy that she would finally be able to see him. Alice remarked that Her Highness must be very pleased, and Catherine exclaimed that she was incredibly excited. "Tea at the Eibergs' house, so much time has passed," said Diana, who approached them. She leaned on Belinda's elbow. Calypso said he was very sorry that Diana could not attend, but there was nothing that could be done. Diana said that unfortunately, she couldn't go to the tea party with such eyes. Calypso replied that this would be impossible unless a miracle happened. Alice and Catherine looked quite pleased at these words. Suddenly, something happened, attracting the attention of everyone present. They saw a man running quickly towards them. "Your Highness," a voice reached them. Diana turned around at the sound of this voice. It was the high priest, and the servants tried unsuccessfully to detain him, explaining that he was not allowed there. The priest exclaimed that he had found the lost sight of Her Highness the Duchess. It was in the air. Diana asked again what was meant, and Alice glanced angrily at the priest. "Hey," Diana said, coming closer. Alice crossed her arms over her chest and declared that Her Highness had given up her sight in exchange for a holy gift, and now the priest was saying that it was supposedly in the air. It sounded like a swindler speaking. But the priest objected that he was simply going to restore Her Highness's sight. Belinda looked at the stranger and said that he really did have the emblem of a priest. She could swear to it. An expression of incredible excitement appeared on Alice's face. Diana pressed her hand to her cheek and sighed that she had definitely passed on her vision to her daughter. She asked how something like that could have happened. The priest replied that it was a real miracle. He explained that he was meditating when he felt this energy in the air. He collected all this energy here. Now the Duchess only had to place her hand on this crystal, and then her sight would return. Diana exclaimed that this could not be true. Catherine also screamed that this couldn't be true. Alice stated that they don't know what might happen if it turns out to be black magic. Diana countered that Alice simply had no idea what it was like to live in a world covered in darkness. She explained that she was ready to seize any opportunity, even if it turned out to be absurd. Alice replied that she was just very worried. Diana said that it was not worth it, because she felt very well that the power contained in this crystal was definitely holy energy. She asked if Belinda would help her, and the night girl readily agreed. The priest held out the crystal and Diana placed her hands on it. The bright light that emanated from them almost blinded everyone present. This unbearable light enveloped Diana's figure. Diana closed her eyes as it happened. There was energy in the air around them all. "Darling," the Duke called to Diana. She raised her hand to her face and said that she could see. Diana exclaimed that she could see everything and turned to the Duke with a beaming smile. This news made an impression on everyone. It was just different. It was truly a miracle. The servants of the mansion exclaimed that Her Holiness had opened her eyes, for even the heavens were touched by her kindness. Diana stood surrounded by maids who wanted to congratulate her. Calypso and Alice exchanged meaningful glances. At last, the Duke found the strength to congratulate his lady, and Alice joined in. Diana called out to Catherine, who was clearly annoyed by what was happening. Diana rushed to hug her, calling her sweet daughter, hugging her. She said she couldn't believe she could see her so clearly again. The maids who watched this scene admired how touching it was. It was truly a blessing. Meanwhile, the priest walked away from them. Soon he turned the corner of the building. "Oh, my lady," said Lueri, assuming his true form. He created a false miracle for her, because it turned out to be an interesting idea. They discussed it during that conversation in Diana's chambers. Diana explained to Lueri that she had good reasons for pretending to be blind, but that there was no longer any need for it. She figured out the goal that all these people were trying to achieve, and the last thing she had to do was find her real daughter, but while she was blind, she was very limited in her options. Lueri will create a fake miracle for her, something convincing enough to fool even the court physicians. Perfect. Diana said that she decided to open her eyes. If he helps her, then she will be able to deceive everyone, so she asked the magician to help her. Lueri looked at Diana carefully. He threw up his hands and said that he was too soft-hearted, so he could not refuse a lady when they looked at him like that. He said his lady could just tell him and he would do his best. With a shining look, Diana thanked Lueri. Then they came up with this plan together. Now that it had happened, Catherine suddenly pushed her away. She asked, what if the vision Diana had given her was damaged, and now something could go wrong? Diana replied that she completely shared the girl's concerns, but she need not worry. She wasn't sick, so she couldn't possibly have gotten this damaged vision. There was nothing surprising about it. Diana exclaimed that it was all a miracle. Alice did not look at her. She was very excited. Calypso was also nervous and looked very gloomy. Diana leaned over to Catherine and said that she looked very ill. Perhaps she was just unwell. The girl replied that she probably just had a slight cold. Diana turned to Alice and asked if she could stay today to look after Catherine. To the companion's objection that she was already getting ready to go, Diana noted that the girl was sweating profusely, so they could not take her with them in such a state. Diana said that they both should have a good rest today. Sending anyone instead of the Duchess was completely unacceptable. Therefore, Diana had to be present at the tea party herself, especially now that she could see again. Diana told Belinda to help her change her clothes again because now she was going out. Alice and Calypso were very angry. The Duke thought that even after everything was prepared, she couldn't even handle it. Everything was so confusing. Catherine fell on her knees and wept for her young master. The carriage was still waiting at the porch. Diana changed into a luxurious pink dress. She came back and said that they could go now. "Mom," Catherine shouted loudly after her. The girl begged to be taken with her. She assured that she had already felt much better. As long as she could be with young Master Sawyer, Catherine did not care who her mother was. She looked at Diana and thought that if she wanted, she would be a real daughter to her. Anyone, just let her take her with her today. Diana extended her hand to the girl. She patted Catherine on the head and said, "Okay, she would be glad to spend such a day with her." "Yes, Mommy," said Catherine enthusiastically. Diana thought Catherine was a good girl and took her hand. Diana was going to take care of this girl just like she did her mother. These two will soon experience despair from both hell and heaven. "Catherine," Alice called to the girl. The carriage drove away from the mansion, and Alice was left alone sitting on the bench and watching them go. It was quite a long drive. The coachman drove the carriage confidently. The Duke's carriage rolled along a country road through the forest. Diana looked out the window and thought it was a very beautiful day. It had been so long since she had gone out without a bandage. The journey from the duchy to the capital took 3 days. But with the help of a magic portal, it takes about an hour. Catherine said she was so glad it worked out that way. After all, Diana was sick because of her, and now she felt better, and this made the girl very happy, because before she felt so guilty in front of her mother. Diana asked if the girl would continue to read books to her to ease the burden on Catherine's heart. Diana said that when he heard Catherine's canary-like voice, it filled her with joy, just like in a beautiful dream. Catherine said that, of course, she liked it too, and Diana thanked the girl. The carriage entered a noisy and crowded city. The boys were running through the streets, hurrying somewhere. They crossed the large courtyard quickly and cheerfully. One boy shouted that apple pie would be for snack today. He said that if they were late, they might not get anything, and then he shouted that they needed to look back. The boy didn't notice how he pushed the girl with golden hair, and she fell, and he asked if she was okay. This girl was Isel. Now she was sitting sadly on the pavement. The ducal carriage entered the glowing portal. After passing through the shining energy, the crew was able to move to the capital. Now they were driving through the streets of this big city. Catherine sat right by the window and said that it seemed like they had already arrived. When the carriage stopped, the coachman helped the girl out of it. She exclaimed that it was very beautiful here. Diana thought it was no wonder the girl was so impressed. With the constant financial problems in the Duchy of Ernst, she could not even dream of such luxury. Diana asked Catherine if it was her first time here. She suggested going inside. A set table awaited them in a luxurious dining room, and they were asked how things were going. The ladies were amazed by the appearance of Her Highness the Duchess, for they had all heard what had happened to her. Diana said that fortunately a real miracle happened to her. "Your Highness, Duchess Ernst," said the lady with dark hair and a blue dress. It was Duchess Serena de Iberg. She said with a smile that she was very glad to see Her Highness healthy again. Serena admitted that she was a little offended when Diana decided to send her doctor instead of coming to the tea party herself. She asked if this doctor was a daughter of the Blair family. Diana said she was sorry to miss tea. She was in such a hurry as soon as she felt better, so she asked Serena to forgive her. Diana told Catherine to greet the Duchess, since they had never met before. The girl stepped forward, curtsied, and said that she greeted Her Highness and that her name was Catherine de Ernst. Catherine looked at Serena with her violet eyes. "God, she's so cute," Serena admired, looking at the girl. She showed them where to go as the children were enjoying drinks in another room. Serena asked why Catherine didn't join them, and the girl replied that she would be happy to. But Diana put her arm around Catherine's shoulders and said that it wasn't really worth it. She explained that Catherine had a cold, so it was better for her to stay with the adults so as not to infect the other children. "Ah," Serena said sadly. Catherine asked indignantly what her mother was saying. "Oh, right, they were in front of the other ladies." Diana looked at the girl and thought that she shouldn't blame anyone because all this was the result of her own lies. Serena said that there was nothing to be done then. Sweet Catherine would be able to meet other children next time. After some time, the ladies sat down at the table and the tea party began. Diana was chatting cheerfully with the others, while Catherine sat nearby and looked gloomy as a thundercloud. Serena was a very polite and interesting conversationalist. This is how the whole wonderful evening passed. The guests began to leave when sunset had already arrived. The same ducal carriage with 4 white horses took them back to the estate. Diana asked Catherine if she had enjoyed everything today. Catherine said out loud that she liked everything, but of course this was not true at all. If Duchess Iberg had not been her future mother-in-law, the girl would have simply overturned this tea table. The carriage entered the portal to make the journey shorter. Oh, Diana thought, looking out the window with admiration. She didn't remember if the sunset had always been as beautiful as it was today. The streets of the town seemed to be completely enveloped in an amber glow. Suddenly, Diana saw golden curls in the sunset light. Diana's eyes widened in surprise. The girl with golden hair ran past the Duke's carriage and disappeared into the alley. "Stop," thought Diana, looking after the girl. "Stop," she shouted for the carriage to stop moving. Having declared that she had some urgent business to attend to, Diana hurried out of the carriage. She told the coachman not to stop, to go home and drop Catherine off there, then they were to return home immediately. The carriage left, and Diana walked alone down the street. The street seemed too empty, and Diana didn't immediately understand where to go now. She saw the children running into one of the alleys, so she had to go in that direction too. She resolutely hurried to where that girl appeared to her. It was already evening. There were almost no people in the alley. Diana also didn't see the children anywhere. She could only hear footsteps and voices somewhere far away in the twilight. Suddenly, she saw that there was a very recognizable building further on. It seemed like there was an orphanage here. Her daughter was still in the duchy, and when she ran away, this was one of the most likely places she would have gone. Diana saw a little girl with a toy in her hands. She approached these children and asked them if they knew if there was a girl with golden hair here, and they answered that there was one here. The girls looked at each other, and one asked the other if she remembered the girl's name, but they were not close to her, so they could not say. Diana asked if they knew where the girl was now. One of the girls looked somewhere to the side. She pointed to the path and said that the golden-haired girl was coming. The girl with the basket was really walking somewhere. She thought that she had already washed everything and cleared everything from the table. Now she could think about what the purpose of all this was. She closed her eyes and also thought about what was happening while she was doing all this here. Suddenly, the girl's hand was squeezed by another hand. In the bright sunset light, Diana and the girl stood opposite each other and looked into each other's eyes. Diana's emerald eyes couldn't stop looking at the girl. "Mom," said the girl, also not looking away. Diana was in such a hurry, running so fast, trying to catch up with her. She remembered those rough hands that handed her the bread. The girl was 15 years old, the same age as Catherine. Diana was so afraid of not making it in time, she called her. Julia said that the girl was blonde, with the same emerald eyes as Diana herself. And now Diana held the hand of this child and thought how she could forget this feeling, the indignation from the sensation of the body of her dead daughter in her arms. "Oh," cried Diana, catching the girl in her arms. She asked her name, and the girl replied that her name was Izel. Diana begged the girl to forgive her. She asked for forgiveness for not recognizing her all this time, for not knowing the real Izel at all. She repeated her name over and over again. She liked the sound of Izel, her daughter. They spent time together until the night when the full moon shone in the sky. The town around them fell asleep and no one disturbed their conversation. Diana and Izel sat next to each other on the bench. "Izel," Diana said, taking the girl's hand. She wanted to know when Izel found out who her real mother was. The girl looked away and replied that she did not know whether the Duchess would believe the story she was about to tell. She said it was so vivid that she couldn't tell the difference between a dream and reality. Izel claimed that she had seen the future. Diana looked at her with disbelief. Was Izel really the same as Diana herself? The girl said that of course she understood how difficult it was to believe such a thing, but Diana objected that it was not so. She took her daughter's hand affectionately. Diana assured Izel that no matter what the girl said, she would always believe her. So she asked him to tell her about everything that awaited them in the future. "Yes, Mom," said Izel and began her story. On that very distant day, it was winter and it was snowing. A small child cried bitterly in a basket that was brought to the orphanage. Izel grew up as an orphan who was abandoned in an orphanage. She grew up as a rather quiet and withdrawn child. When she was old enough to leave the orphanage, she thought about how she would live, what she would eat. It was then that she saw a hand extended to her. Then Alice appeared, a well-dressed, smiling lady. She took Isel from the orphanage and brought her to the Duke's estate. Alice told the girl that now she would start working as a servant and would serve the Duke's daughter. The girl should have been grateful that she was given such an opportunity and taken from that old orphanage. Isel replied that she understood everything. She was so happy to serve the daughter of Duke Ernst. It was certainly better than staying in the orphanage. But it turned out to be not such a fairy tale as she initially thought. Catherine was capricious and demanding, yelling and ordering, and then complaining when Isel didn't do the cleaning she was assigned. Catherine called her a useless piece of trash and told her to get up quickly. She pulled her maid by the hair, scolded, and punished her. Isel had nowhere to escape the bullying and could only cry, locked in the luxurious ducal mansion. She sat in the closet, huddled against the wall. There was stale and moldy bread in the bowl next to her. But when Isel took a bite of this bread, she found something disgusting there. Isel looked at this in horror. She threw away the bread, which she could no longer eat. Isel didn't understand how much longer she would have to live like this, being treated like some kind of animal, or even worse. She didn't understand why her life was so terrible. The girl cried, not understanding where she had gone wrong and what she had done wrong. She had to work hard all the time. One day she was sweeping the room when someone knocked on the door and asked Catherine for permission to enter. It was Lady Alice. She ordered Isel to leave the room immediately. The girl obeyed and tried to hide to eavesdrop on the conversation. She heard someone say that she had caught it. Isel leaned towards the crack in the door to make the conversation easier to hear. If you carefully leaned towards the door, you could even see the faces of your interlocutors. They discussed that she had caught them, but it was completely unclear who had caught whom. Alice, crossing her arms over her chest, said that she had found out about their relationship with Catherine's father. Isel realized that this woman, who was the family doctor, had a relationship with the Duke. It was known that the Duchess was completely blind, and although Isel had never even seen her face, she felt terribly sorry for her. Leaning against the door, Isel listened to the woman tell Catherine all these things. Despite the fact that Catherine was the Duchess's daughter, it was completely incomprehensible. But Catherine reacted as if none of this surprised her at all. Alice said she was thinking of locking Diana away somewhere far from the duchy where no one would come and where no one would ever find her. Catherine asked if everything would be okay and then called the doctor's mother. Isel pressed her hands to her face in extreme agitation. Alice threw up her hands and declared that Diana was already blind in any case on the eve of her debut. Catherine should have simply received the rights to exploit the Marquis Ferechte mine. Then all this drama will finally be over. Catherine clarified whether Alice will finally become a duchess. The doctor replied that on the day of Diana's death, it would be necessary to deal with that girl as well. Alice did not want Calypso to know that his real daughter was alive. At first, Alice didn't even want to see her, but the girl turned out to be quite pretty. But since she was from the family of this blind wretch, it was all useless. Isel kept trying to understand what it all meant. The girl was stunned to think that she was the Duchess's real daughter. How could she be the daughter of a duchess, a girl, a city dweller, raised in an orphanage, serving in the Duke's mansion? Only now was she beginning to understand something. These were the reasons why Alice locked her here. The realization dawned on Isel as she sat on the floor of her closet. It turned out that this entire ducal family was simply fake. The real one among them was Isel. The girl was overcome with rage and knew that she would never be able to forgive them. Isel stood up with determination and summoned her magic. Enveloped in icy sparks, snowflakes swirled around the girl in the air. She looked at her hands, wondering what that was. Isel wondered if this could be magic. The girl didn't know why she suddenly had such powers, but now she would save her mother. It was a night during which Catherine slept soundly. Isel's closet was locked with a padlock as always. The girl thought that it was just luck. She was definitely supposed to go out today. Isel will just try out his magical powers a few times. The girl intended to use this magic on the locked door. A magical glow enveloped the castle, penetrating through the keyhole. He gave in, and Isel succeeded. The girl was happy. Wrapped in a hooded cloak, the girl carefully crawled out of the secret door. The rooms and corridors of the mansion were empty and dark. It was a quiet, starry night. The girl went out into the garden. She rushed to run along the path. She needed to have time to do everything. Isel was very scared and worried about what was happening. She heard Alice say that she was thinking of locking Diana in a hut outside the estate. Isel managed to find this hut in a remote corner. She thought that her mother was in this place. Diana was locked in this dirty, ill-fitting barn, dressed in her light clothes. Izel opened the door and saw the Duchess sitting on the floor. Diana asked who was there. "Mom," a thought flashed through Azel's head. She came closer, unable to bear to see the Duchess in such a place, in such a humiliated state. Placing her burden in front of her, Azel began to run back. Diana felt the loaf of bread in front of her with surprise. Izel ran and thought that just a little more. Mother needed to wait just a little more until she grew her own strength. With tears in her eyes, Azel silently begged that Diana could endure until this moment. The girl didn't know that when she ran through the forest, Alice was hiding in the shadows behind a tree. Several days passed. It was the same starry night. All this time, Azel trained her magic. Now she was doing it many times better than before. The girl was very hungry because all this time she had been living in hunger. She wrapped the stale bread she had in a napkin and left it in the basket. After all, if she doesn't help her mother, then Diana will have to go hungry. The girl could not allow this, so she brought food to the Duchess, and Diana called her Catherine. Mother was so naive to think that this girl was capable of mercy. She didn't understand at all that her real daughter was Izel. Then the girl returned to her place. The road lay through a dark forest. Izel burst into tears. She was not Catherine, but she did not understand how and when she would be able to tell the Duchess the truth. She would like to escape at least a day earlier. When Izel reached the courtyard of the mansion, Alice was waiting for her with a squad of archers. She asked if the girl had a good walk that night. Izel looked at these people with despair. Catherine and the Duke were there too, and Catherine turned to her father. She pointed at Izel and snitched on her for not obeying the order not to walk around the hut. The Duke looked at Azel thoughtfully. She was so young. He didn't remember such a servant in his house. Izel also looked at the Duke, trying to comprehend that this man was her father. The Duke declared that since the girl had disobeyed the order, they would punish her to the fullest extent, because this was the rule of their family. Catherine said that this was how she repaid her favor. Killing was not enough. Izel was shocked to hear these words. "Mercy," she asked loudly, standing in front of these people. Catherine screamed that she didn't know her place at all, and raised her hand to strike. Izel looked into her eyes without flinching. She used her magic to stop Catherine's hand. Alice and the Duke also saw the servant girl using such strong magic to defend herself. Catherine fell to her knees on the ground and began to sob, looking at her frozen hand. "What are you doing?" cried Calypso, holding out his hand. The archers drew their bowstrings and took aim. All their arrows were aimed at the mortally frightened Izel. "No!" Izel thought with horror. "This shouldn't have happened." She tried to use magic now. But her father did not run to save her, but to the tearful Catherine. The arrows struck Izel, who had time to think that she was the Duke's real daughter. But he leaned over the crying Catherine. Izel had time to think that he still didn't recognize her. She didn't know why. She wanted to ask why he did this to her mother. Izel wanted to ask him so much, but she could no longer speak. She fell to the ground, pierced by many arrows. She tried to reach out and call her father, but her eyes were already closing. Then Izel woke up in her bed in the same closet where she lived. It was definitely her room. There were no wounds on her body. It turned out that she had not even died, because she clearly remembered how she was shot. Suddenly, with horror, she heard a knock on the door. It was Catherine, as always, kicking her and demanding that Azel come out. Azel cautiously peeked out of the closet and asked if the young lady had called her. Catherine grabbed her by the hair and pulled her along. She pushed Azel in front of a dirty puddle and debris. She had ordered everything to be cleaned up while she was gone, and Azel thought it was the same last time. Catherine asked if Azel understood her. She asked what was that look on her maid's face. Did she really have any complaints? Azel simply couldn't believe what was happening. It turned out that she really did go back to the past. The girl didn't know what happened, but this was her chance to change everything. Now she will never live the same way again. Azel told Diana all this while they were sitting next to each other on a bench, and Diana asked if the story was true, and Azel replied that she understood how hard it was to believe something like that. And then Diana said that she did too. "What?" Azel asked again, not understanding, and then Diana explained that she had also returned. Azel exclaimed that it was impossible, but Diana patted her on the head and said that it was probably no coincidence that she and her daughter had both returned to the past. Diana said she was going to take revenge. Alice and Catherine, who did this to them, made them want to. And then there was the stupid father who allowed his own daughter to be killed. Azel furiously declared that she wanted to take revenge on them all. Diana thought how hard and hurtful it was for this girl. She didn't know why it all happened, but they came back together after going through all this. It would probably be cruel to dissuade the girl from revenge just because she was young, and Diana said that it was fine, but they needed to prepare for everything. Soon, the coachman called out to the Duchess, and she realized that she had kept him waiting for a very long time. He looked at the girl who was standing next to the Duchess. The girl was poorly dressed, and the coachman asked the Duchess who was next to her. Diana ordered to take them with this girl to Parachute. They set off for the given address in the Duke's carriage. Aizel looked around in surprise and even felt the carriage seat beneath her. The girl was absolutely delighted with all this. Diana asked her what it was, and Aizel replied that it was the first time she had sat on such a soft and comfortable seat. Diana looked at the girl, then touched her hands and said that first she needed to gain weight. With fear, Aizel assumed that perhaps her grandfather would not like her appearance. When she lived in the orphanage, she heard more than once about the Marquis, that he was from a noble family with a large fortune. Aizel said that she looked very pathetic, unlike him, but Diana assured that this was not true. Aizel didn't believe it, but Diana said that her father, of course, had always been a meticulous person. She said that Aizel would understand everything herself when she saw him. Soon they arrived at the house of Marquis Ferecht, which greatly surprised all his servants. There was a knock on the door of the Marquis's office. "Your Highness," the maid said right from the doorway. The maid explained that a lady had arrived. The Marquise, hearing this, turned around. Diana, in a formal pink dress, and a thin girl in poor clothes, very similar to her, stood in the hall. They were invited to go into the living room and take a seat on the sofa. The Marquis asked how Diana ended up here at this time. Then he asked who this child was. Diana replied that it was her daughter, which amazed the Marquis. He exclaimed what she was talking about, and Diana replied that she would explain everything now. Diana said that it might be difficult for her father to believe such a thing, and then she told her story. The Marquis abruptly put his cup of tea down on the table. "How?" said the Marquis, greatly agitated. He was outraged that Calypso dared to cheat on Diana and even switch the child. Diana asked her father to calm down. He asked how she could be so calm now, but Diana explained that she was just waiting. She pressed her hand to her chest and said that all this was for the sake of greater revenge. So Diana asked her father to help her. The Marquis closed his eyes. His face became inexpressibly gloomy. His beloved daughter was more precious to him than his whole life. Thoughts about what had happened to her made him clench his fists in frustration. He didn't understand why she wanted to return to the lair of traitors again, and no matter how hard it was for the Marquis, he thought that they were even worse off. The Marquis asked the girl what her name was. He seemed to have heard that her name was Aizel. He asked the girl how she had lived all this time, and Diana replied that Aizel had lived as a servant inside the bookcase in Catherine's room. "Diana," said the Marquis, and asked her to explain her entire plan to him. The Marquis assured that he would definitely help his daughter. During the day, the Duke's entire family gathered at the table. Calypso noticed that Diana had not dined with them for a long time, and she replied that she had something to say now while they were still there. "What exactly?" asked the Duke, suspecting nothing. Diana said that she wanted to adopt a girl. Calypso and Alice couldn't believe what they heard. Catherine jumped up and screamed furiously that her mother had her. The Duke asked what his dear wife was talking about, and Diana explained that her father had written to her that he had found Parachute's relatives in one of the shelters. Diana said that she doesn't know the whole story, but apparently there is no one to raise this child. She was going to raise this child with her sister Catherine. The girl screamed that she didn't want this, that she didn't need any sister at all. But Diana objected that it was necessary. She said that it was high time for Catherine to grow up. She suggested that the girl would change if she had someone to constantly compare herself to. At that moment, one of her trusted maids approached Diana. She reported that it seemed that this girl had already arrived at the estate. A girl in a light dress entered the room. She curtsied to greet the family seated at the table. Catherine looked at this guest in horror. She couldn't believe it was her. "Hello," said the girl with golden hair. Catherine recognized exactly who the girl was who said her name was Aizel. 2 weeks ago, the maids in the house of Marquis Ferecht looked at this girl. This child was incredibly similar to Lady Diana. The lady herself had already left, leaving the care of the girl to her father and a maid named Lisa. She asked very much to take care of her in every possible way. Now it was Aizel's first morning in this house. Lisa woke her up, calling her by her title. Aizel sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. She said with surprise that yesterday, it turns out, was not a dream at all. Lisa asked what was wrong, but the girl replied that nothing had happened. She looked, and around was a luxuriously furnished room with a lot of expensive things. Isel was shocked by all this. She asked when they had managed to prepare so much for her, since she had only arrived yesterday evening, and now there were even many dresses on mannequins in front of her. Lisa said with a laugh that there had been such a terrible commotion yesterday. The Marquis shouted at the servants that he would pay double for everything, but they had to sew a dress for the child right away. Lisa told Isel about all this. That's what happened yesterday. There was noise throughout the city. Now all these beautiful outfits belong to Isel, although Lisa was sorry that they were not as graceful as they could have been. "No!" Isel exclaimed, reaching for the outfits. She said they were all so beautiful, and Lisa explained that they would start after the bath. The bathroom also amazed the girl with its dazzling luxury. A row of maids lined up in front of Isel. Lisa said that they would first help the girl undress. Isel objected that she could wash herself, but she was told to relax. The maids surrounded her. One was taking off her shoes, another was combing her hair, and a third was bringing some necessary things. Lisa was sorting out the girl's golden curls. She thought that this girl had a terrible time living in the orphanage. Lisa told Isel that they needed to go to the bathroom. The girl carefully lowered her foot into the pool and touched the water with her toes. She climbed into the huge bathtub, and Lisa asked her how she liked the water temperature. Isel, fascinated, scooped up a handful of foamy water. She looked at the huge soap bubbles that were rising above the bathtub. Lisa added soap and aromatic oils to the water. Isel looked at the maid. She felt awkward. She asked if she could use such things. She had heard that this was the oil that the Duchy of Iburg produced because Catherine really wanted to buy it. It must have been very expensive. "Your Highness," Lisa exclaimed, coming closer to her. She kneaded the girl's shoulders and said that the Marquis had ordered that she should have the best of everything while she was here. So Isel didn't have to think about it anymore. She could enjoy everything she couldn't before because now it all belonged to her. Lisa was absolutely right. Isel was no longer an orphan from an orphanage. And she won't have to be a bookcase maid either. "Yes," she said. "Okay," and let Lisa take care of herself. After Isel had bathed and changed her clothes, she came to the Marquis. "Has she come?" he asked, and the girl answered yes. The Marquis noted that the girl looked much better. Isel replied that the dress was very beautiful and thanked her for it. "Nothing special," said the Marquis. "He just had some extra dresses in the palace." But Isel didn't believe in this coincidence. She remembered that Lisa had already told her about these outfits and who they were actually intended for. At that moment, the maid carefully rolled a food cart covered with a white cloth into the dining room. Isel, sitting at a large table, watched in amazement as the servants began to place a variety of dishes on it. Her eyes widened. She had never seen so many different foods in her life, let alone tasted them. Each dish looked delicious, aromatic, and rich, and at that moment the Marquise gently told the girl not to be shy and to begin eating calmly. But Isel looked at all this splendor uncertainly, feeling awkward. She didn't know how to approach these dishes correctly, where to start, what utensils to use. There were too many devices here that were unclear how to use. She realized that if she ate incorrectly, as she had been accustomed to before, she could be judged or even scolded. "Isel." The Marquis's voice sounded next to her, warm and invigorating. He carefully moved one of the dishes towards her, as if telling her where to start. He repeated that she shouldn't be shy because everything can be mastered. The Marquise explained that all this could be learned over time and was nothing to be ashamed of. Hearing this, Isel felt a weight lift from her heart, and she looked at the food with interest and enthusiasm. She thanked His Highness and wished him bon appétit. But the Marquise, smiling, suggested that she call him grandfather from now on, since she was his only granddaughter. The servant stood nearby and watched the master's meal with a smile. Isel carefully tried the first piece. It was something extraordinary. For the first time in her life, she tasted real meat. The Marquise watched the girl eat and thought that next time he would have to ask for more variety of dishes. Isel took some more food and looked at it with curiosity, holding it in her hand. Her memory flashed back to the days when she had carried moldy bread into the hut to somehow keep Diana alive. "Grandfather," said Isel, "I have a personal request for you." She asked him to help her become a real lady, impeccable and worthy, as quickly as possible. The Marquis looked into his empty glass and said that revenge from Isel's mother would be enough. But Isel exclaimed that her desire to protect her mother was sincere and strong. She felt like she just had to do it. She felt like she just had to be there and become stronger for her mother. These words made the Marquis think. He knew that Diana had also spoken to him about revenge, that she was waiting for the right moment to strike harder. The Marquis noticed that looking at Isel now, he realized that she was similar to her mother not only in appearance. "Very well," said the Marquis, "that is what they will do." And now, 2 weeks later, Isel entered the Duke's mansion in a new dress. With a small, confident smile, she greeted everyone in the room and introduced herself by name. Diana, smiling reservedly, informed the Duke that this was the same Isel and then invited the girl to sit down. "Yes, Mom," she said, and walked to the empty seat next to Catherine. Catherine thought with indignation, since when did the Duchess become a mother to this girl? Isel looked at Diana with the warmth that only one looks at a very loved person. Catherine noticed this and was overcome with confusion, trying to understand what was really going on. Alice, who was sitting a little further away, was in shock. She thought that this simply couldn't be. The family meal continued with a new lineup. Calypso remarked that his dear wife should have been more careful about the adoption. How could she not even tell him about it? Diana calmly replied that her father had recently made her an important proposal. She explained that Isel had magical powers, and that was the reason she wanted the girl to take part in the Magic Festival. The Magic Festival was a major competition held by the Master of a Magic School and attracting many participants. Anyone with magical skills could take part in the festival. Participants are free to demonstrate their abilities to the masters, and they can gain recognition from lower-ranking wizards to the highest. Diana said that whoever wins the fair fight will receive a gift from Diana's father. She said it would most likely be running a diamond mine. Calypso exclaimed sharply that this gift was supposed to go to Catherine on the day of her debut. "Don't worry," Diana said with a smile. She expressed confidence that the real daughter would beat the fake one. Hearing this, Alice suddenly jumped up from her seat, as if the words had dealt her a direct blow, and glared at the girl with irritation, pressing her palms hard against the tabletop, as if she wanted to keep her anger under control. She muttered, without looking anyone in the eye, that she needed to leave, citing the fact that she felt unwell. The whole dinner had had too much effect on her. Catherine stood up quickly after her, pushing her chair back with a sharp creak, and dryly declared that she too had to leave, while avoiding Diana's gaze. The Duke remained seated at the head of the table in gloomy silence. Meanwhile, Diana, trying to remain casual, turned to Isel with a slight smile and asked how she liked her lunch. Isel, straightening her back and looking at Diana with shining eyes, confidently answered that everything was very tasty. Her voice sounded sincere and joyful, like that of a child who was treated to a real feast for the first time. At this moment, one of the maids brought into the room a neatly folded stack of documents, tied with a ribbon, and handed them to the Duchess with a bow. These turned out to be the official papers for Isel's adoption, the very documents that had to be dealt with today, without delay. It will be hard to dissuade him, because the Marquis's mine is at stake. But nothing could be changed, and Calypso took the papers with restraint, saying that since everything had already been decided, he had no objection. Diana, seeing that Isel had finished eating, invited her to leave the dining room. She wanted to take her around the house a little, show her the mansion. "Okay," said the girl, and they got ready to go. As she said goodbye, she turned to the Duke and said affectionately that they would definitely see each other again, adding the word "Papa," as if tasting it. Calypso shuddered in surprise when he heard this word, and at first he did not immediately understand how to react, because the girl, looking at him, was so similar to Diana. Diana and Isel left the dining room, their silhouettes disappearing into the sunlit corridor that led to the far wing of the mansion. Calypso was left alone at the long table, between the half-eaten dishes and empty glasses, in a silence that was now filled only with his thoughts. He thought about this girl who was so similar to Diana, even though it was sudden. He understood that despite the suddenness of her appearance, Isel might actually have the right to be called a duchess, especially if she had the ability to use magic. Meanwhile, moving further away, Isel clenched her fists tightly, her hands shaking slightly from anger. She whispered quietly that she was disgusted to look at the face of the man who once killed her. Diana looked at the girl carefully and calmly agreed that she understood her feelings. Then she suggested postponing the tour of the mansion until next time if Isel was not in the mood. "No," Isel objected firmly and confidently. She said she wanted to start with Catherine's room, which she thought might be fun if a little weird. At this time, Catherine was in her room, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she tried unsuccessfully to hold back her sobs. Seeing Diana and Azel enter, Catherine suddenly raised her head and asked with undisguised anger why the Duchess had brought this girl here, since she did not want to see her. Diana sternly asked her not to speak like that again, because now Azel would become her sister, and she needed to learn to accept it. Alice, who was standing aside, intervened and asked reproachfully how this girl could be considered the sister of a real young lady. "This girl?" Diana asked again in an icy tone, stepping forward. She asked Alice if this wasn't her first meeting with Azel. Diana said that even if they were friends, she didn't dare cross the line. This child wasn't someone that someone like Alice dared to treat with disdain. Alice was embarrassed and mumbled an apology, but Diana would not let her get away with it. She demanded that she apologize properly and respectfully. The Duchess emphasized that now there was a new lady from the House of Ernst standing before her, and Alice must respect her status. Alice wondered who she was supposed to apologize to here. She bowed before Azel and asked the lady to forgive her as she had made a mistake. Azel looked at her carefully and then said loudly and politely that everything was fine. She understood that this happened. She said she understood that this could happen if a person had not been given a proper trial. And since the doctor was from the impoverished Blair household, it could easily be explained. She also heard that Alice, as a friend of her mother, received a lot of help from the Ferechte house. "I understand everything," Azel said with a smile, but asked to be more careful in the future. Then Azel walked over to the bookshelf, looked at the shelves, and pointed. Then Azel said that nothing had changed here at all. She looked at Catherine and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and then asked how things were. Catherine looked at Azel with bitterness and a flash of anger in her eyes. "What?" she exclaimed indignantly. Catherine pointed her finger at the girl and shouted that they wanted to deceive everyone here. There was no way someone like her could be related to their family. "Deception?" she said. "Does she really know everything?" Azel slowly approached Catherine, looking her straight in the eyes, and calmly stated that it was she and Alice who were the liars. She said she remembered Catherine asking her to use magic on her behalf to trick her mother into thinking she was more gifted. Catherine pushed her away with a sharp movement, as if fighting off the truth. She said indignantly that she had spoken about it, but such trivial magic was nothing, and she could master it herself. Azel looked away and asked what was the point. Once she told that Catherine and Alice locked her behind the bookcase and bullied her, Catherine wouldn't even be allowed to enter the Magic Academy. The two girls' gazes crossed, and Catherine asked if Azel was threatening her now, since she could just get rid of this room. "Okay," said Azel, turning away, and then suggested doing it this way. Azel slowly moved to the side, walking around the table. And suddenly a scream was heard, and Catherine, with her hand stained with blood, screamed that it wasn't her, that she was not guilty of anything. Diana rushed towards Azel and picked her up in her arms. Pale and covered in blood, Azel said she was simply trying to get closer to Catherine and asked if they could use the room together. Azel said that she probably didn't like it. She threw a glass at her and hit her. Azel, lying on the floor with a forced smile, said that what happened was only her own mistake. She was hasty, she was careless. She sincerely asked not to blame Catherine for this. But Catherine screamed back, barely holding back tears and rage. She claimed that Azel had set this all up in advance on purpose to make her look bad in front of everyone. When Catherine suddenly rushed towards Azel, covering the remaining distance in 2 steps, and raised her hand, intending to hit the girl. But at that same moment, Azel deftly grabbed a sharp shard from the carpet and, without losing her composure, rose from the floor, holding the weapon in her hand. She held her hand with the shard out in front of her. Catherine froze, staring in confusion at her own palm, on which blood suddenly appeared. She did not immediately understand how and when this happened. Azel, still smiling, now with a soft superiority, stated that she had foreseen everything in advance. She knew that Catherine would give in to anger and try to attack her. Now the shard was stained with blood, proof of Catherine's aggression captured in reality. Catherine looked at the scarlet stains on her hand, unable to believe that this beggar, this homeless girl, dared to touch her, and not just touch her, but hurt her. She didn't understand how this tramp dared to touch her, as if she thought she could get away with it. Before she could react, Azel suddenly moved closer to her and suddenly grabbed Catherine by the wrist, holding her tightly as if in a vice. "Don't worry," Azel said quietly, and with absolute calm, she pressed Catherine's bloody hand to her face and then smeared it on the hem of her dress. Catherine burst into tears, her voice shaking as she screamed in panic for them to leave her alone. Azel said it didn't matter. Catherine hadn't done anything like that. Anyway, everyone in the mansion would soon find out about her cruelty. With these words, she sank down onto the carpet, but a satisfied, almost triumphant smile remained on her face. "What?" said Catherine, still confused, not realizing how quickly and irreversibly the situation had gotten out of her control. At that moment, the doors of the room swung open and Diana appeared on the threshold. She entered quickly, noticing the mess and blood, and her gaze instantly fell on the two girls. Everyone who followed the Duchess found the following picture. Catherine was standing over Azel, lying on the floor with a bloody dress and face. Mommy, quietly sobbing, spoke to Azel as if in fear and admitted that everything happened because of her fault, because she was too careless. Catherine exclaimed that she was pretending because it was she who had attacked Catherine. "Catherine!" Diana called out sharply, her voice taking on a stern and peremptory tone. Alice watched everything that was happening with silent wariness, not interfering, but remembering every detail. The trusted maids watched the proceedings in silence. "It's unbearable," Diana finally said, slowly moving her gaze from one girl to the other. Diana asked how a noble lady could raise a hand against someone, since she had raised her daughter completely differently. The Duchess solemnly announced that from now on this room would belong to Azel. This would be a punishment for Catherine for her indecent behavior. She ordered Shane and Milan to immediately start cleaning the room and prepare it for the new owner. "Now this room will be renovated and given to Azel," Diana said with concern that Azel needed to be shown to a doctor as soon as possible. Alice came closer, and stopping just at the door, said Catherine's name in a quiet but insistent voice. She said she needed to talk to the girl, but she ran past her. Left alone, Alice went out into the corridor and stopped, looking into the void, not knowing where to start the conversation if she had a chance. At this time, the bright sun was shining over the mansion, relentlessly flooding the facades and tiled roofs with gold. Even through the tightly closed shutters, the sun's rays found a way inside. Full of determination, Catherine threw open the doors of the library, a spacious room filled to the brim with books. She thought about magic, and how some people thought she couldn't learn to use it, but now she just needed all the books related to forbidden magic. Before that, she was always forced to read books. Now Catherine came herself and looked at the shelves. She found a book that might be useful to her. The magic Diana had cast on the library allowed one to navigate around it much faster than was normally possible, which was quite useful. Thanks to these charms, Catherine quickly collected a whole stack of thick tomes that she intended to study. Catherine sat down at the table to read, because they were wrong to think that she wouldn't be able to learn even the most trivial magic. She would still make Azel regret it all. The sun brightly illuminated the flowering branches of the tree and the birds circling nearby. In the mansion, the servants were rushing to rearrange the furniture. They were dragging a heavy, velvet-covered sofa, choosing the best place for it. They also brought a round table with carved legs behind him. Then the maids changed the paintings on the walls. Even the heavy wardrobe on carved legs was moved from its place, all for the sake of the new owner. Catherine watched all this fuss. She saw that the new furniture was much more expensive and luxurious than what she had, and it was intended for someone like Azel. Azel, noticing her gaze, came closer and said that each of these things was personally chosen for her by her grandfather, Marquis Ferechte. She asked if this was really the first time Catherine had seen such things, furniture of such quality, fabrics of such price, and added that this was understandable. After all, the Ernst house had long been in a dire situation. Catherine screamed at her to get out. She was in no mood to talk to someone like Azel. Alice came up, coughed, and said hello. She asked permission to bandage the wound on Mistress Catherine's hand. "Then I'll go," Azel heard and answered, "Of course." Alice's medicine chest contained many bottles of medicine. She treated Catherine's arm and said that the healing was going well. It would get better in 2 weeks, although the scar would remain. Alice wanted to know if it was Catherine who started the quarrel and fight first. Catherine wondered if her mother had no sense of pride at all. How could she bow her head to someone like this, Azel? Alice told Catherine to calm down. She said that now was not the time for this. Unless, of course, she wanted to lose to Azel, Catherine exclaimed that no way. Alice stated that then she needed to learn to hide her emotions. She couldn't just rush into battle. Catherine asked why even her mother did not doubt her guilt, although in fact, she was the victim. The girl looked at Alice's face with fury. Alice stated that she would someday find a way for Catherine to pass the magic test. Okay, Catherine said grimly. She headed for the door and said that she had her own plan, so that Mom could continue to work on her own to become a real Grand Duchess. Catherine left, and Alice was left to watch the door slam shut. Alice had a lot to think about when she was left alone. She stood, leaning her open palm on the table. She remembered how Catherine had burst into her office screaming that the girl had escaped. Alice understood that she shouldn't have let Azel go from the very beginning. If the girl hadn't run away, there wouldn't be all these problems now, but it was unclear what to do with all this now. Alice suddenly thought, opening her eyes wide. Yes, that's right, she said and rushed to the writing set. Alice took up her pen and wrote a rather long message very quickly. She heard about a place where they would solve any problem if you paid money. It was called the Dark Market. They say that they not only provide any information, but also carry out orders for murders. Yes, thought Alice, this was probably the only way they had left. With this gloomy decision, Alice spent the rest of the day. Diana, smiling with admiration, looked at the result of the renovation in the room. She exclaimed that it turned out incredibly beautiful. Look at this, Mom. Azel supported her and pointed to the dresses and jewelry that Lisa and the maids had prepared for her. For now, Azel was going to wear ready-made dresses, and later, when she made her debut in society, they would sew many new ones for her. She just needed to write a letter to her grandfather and thank him. Diana exclaimed that her Azel was so kind. The girl looked at Diana and said that the ladies' lessons were not so difficult at all. As soon as she remembered Catherine and Alice, her anger immediately gave her strength. Diana thought sadly that everything might have been different if she had protected her child from the very beginning. Azel, she said, hugging the girl tenderly, and promised that she would never let her go again, and she replied that she would not let her mother go either. Your Grace, the maid addressed them with shining eyes. You're here, she said, and Diana asked what happened. Milan replied that they said that the master magician had arrived. Lueri was in the garden looking at the blossoming flowers. The Duke was in his office at this time, thinking. Azel came and knocked on the door, saying that this was his daughter. Azel, Calypso thought. He heard that Catherine was abusing this child. He wondered if this was why she came. All these showdowns were really annoying him, but he still allowed the girl to enter. Azel approached his desk cautiously, but the Duke told her that he was very busy right now, so she needed to speak faster. Azel looked at the Duke hopefully and asked if he would like to come with her to see her new room. Calypso asked in surprise why her mother couldn't do it. Azel bowed her head and explained that her mother was busy at the moment. She was having a magic lesson, and Catherine still felt awkward with her new sister, especially last time. The girl said she was sorry that last time she could only say hello. She asked if her request would be problematic for the Duke now. Calypso thought about it and said that there was no problem, so they could go and see. The Duke and the girl headed down the corridor towards Catherine's former chambers, which now belonged to Azel. The girl walked, keeping very close to the Duke, forcing him to match her step. The Duke asked how she was living in her estate, and Azel replied that every day in this place brought her only joy. The garden of the Ernst estate, although small, is very beautiful. That's why Azel went out for a walk every day without fail. She was very happy during these hours when she ran through the grass and birds and butterflies circled around her. It was clear, said the Duke, that the more he got to know this new girl, the more he noticed how different she was from Catherine. Her manners and nobility are naturally expressed in her behavior, yet she remains innocent and pure, as if untouched by time. Calypso remembered the day Diana's daughter was born. Alice said she was very sorry, but the child could not be saved. And now Calypso thought about that girl. Perhaps this child would now be just like Azel. Father, the girl's voice distracted the Duke from the dark thoughts that had taken hold of him. Azel asked if the Duke was okay because she thought he was not feeling well, but Calypso replied that he was fine. We've arrived, said Azel, and opened the doors to the room. She waved her hands at the whole changed environment and asked how her father found it. She said that her grandfather had given her this furniture. Calypso was surprised to realize that all of this had been purchased by the Marquise. Azel glanced sideways at the Duke, clearly enjoying his bewilderment. Diana, having picked up her lush, multi-layered skirts, ran quickly through the garden. "Oh my God, what's wrong with me?" she thought in despair, because she was already late for class. The magician was already waiting for her on the lawn, and she called out his name as she ran. Lueri was clearly pleased and smiled at his lady. Diana began to apologize for being late while still running, and her foot in her elegant shoe gave way. Diana screamed, lost her balance, and began to fall, throwing up her arms. Diana closed her eyes tightly, realizing the inevitability of the fall. Only a strong and reliable hand managed to catch her. Lueri held Diana back and slyly touched her nose with his finger, saying that it was good that he had managed to catch the lady, otherwise she risked breaking her pretty nose. Diana looked at the magician in amazement, not yet fully realizing what had just happened. Lueri asked if she was hurt. She looked completely red. The magician released her from his embrace but continued to hold her hand. Diana said that she apologized for her sudden lateness, and Lueri stated that now he felt a little offended because it meant that she had something more important than him. Diana confessed to Lueri that she had recently suddenly had a daughter. She had adopted this girl quite recently, but they were like two peas in a pod. Lueri asked how it was that the Duchess had a daughter, and Diana laughingly replied that, among other things, she was thinking about this girl also learning magic. After thinking for a few minutes, Lueri said that if the girl looked like her mother, it meant she must be very cute. Lueri said that the Duchess should definitely introduce them later, but for now they would begin their lesson for today. It was a clear, fine day, with snow-white clouds floating in the blue sky and the sun shining brightly. In the backyard there was a special training dummy made from a rotating barrel and poles. Belinda stood in front of him, clutching the sword in both hands with a serious expression on her face. After training, the girl knight sheathed her sword. She took a breath and wiped the sweat from her forehead, thinking that by this time her ladyship's magic lesson had probably already ended, so it was time to slowly walk towards her. Lueri snorted dismissively as he watched his student's efforts. The results of her efforts only caused him to laugh in a way that was offensive to Diana. He said that she had created an ice needle, and then asked if that was what she was going to attack with Diana. Stammering, begged the mentor to stop making fun of her. Lueri agreed that the ridicule should stop, but it was worth trying again, at which point Belinda, already dressed in her maid's outfit, called out to her ladyship. The girl just wanted to ask if their lesson was over yet. Hearing her voice, the magician quickly turned around to see who it was. When he saw Belinda, he was incredibly surprised because he recognized this girl. Diana watched the meeting of these two with surprise, because Belinda came so close to the magician, and it was obvious that they knew each other. Belinda explained to her ladyship with a smile that she had already told her how she had grown up in an orphanage in the Marquisate, and sometimes orphanages from the same region would organize joint events. Lueri was a friend of Belinda's whom she had met at one of these events. Diana exclaimed that perhaps this place was familiar to her then too. She asked what the name of this shelter was. Belinda said that the shelter where Lueri lived was called Angeline. This name sounded strange to Diana. She thought about it. Angelina's shelter, Diana said, somewhat confused. It was strange because she had been helping in orphanages for a long time, and their wards knew her well. She played with children and socialized closely, and Angeline's orphanage was among the establishments she patronized. But Diana had never met anyone named Lueri there. She looked at the magician. He looked unusually thoughtful at that moment. Why, Diana wondered, her face taking on a sad expression. Ah, Diana suddenly sighed, causing Lueri and Belinda to look sharply in her direction. Diana grabbed her head. Through the veil of sudden pain, she heard her name being called. She muttered that she just had a headache again. Belinda ran to her mistress to support her and asked her ladyship to lean on her. Lueri also asked the girl to take care of the lady. Diana's shoes stepped heavily on the green grass of the lawn. Leaning on Belinda, she walked slowly away, with Lueri watching them. Belinda led her mistress through the flower gallery, where scarlet flowers were blooming. "Lady," Lueri said, not taking his eyes off them. A boy with silver hair stood before a woman who bowed in reverence. She called him Calypso and said that she had brought him clothes that he should wear to the imperial reception. She held out these clothes to him and asked if he liked them. The boy took the clothes and said, "Is that really all?" The woman pressed her hand to her chest and apologized, saying that she wanted to buy something better. The full moon shone above the house, illuminating the dark night. Calypso was in despair. He sat down against the wall, huddled into a ball. He thought that he was a representative of noble imperial blood. He was the heir to the great ducal house, but he was forced to wear such cheap clothes. The boy's fingers clenched angrily on the folds of the hated fabric. He threw the clothes away, deciding that it was better not to go anywhere than to be disgraced. The boy's grandfather led a wasteful and idle life, which caused him to accumulate huge debts. This man was the illegitimate son of the emperor. Poverty was passed down from generation to generation, and the family's fortune steadily worsened, and Calypso was unable to pay off these debts even after he took over as Grand Duke. It was absolutely terrible for Calypso to be an aristocrat and at the same time to vegetate in terrible poverty. At the reception, he heard the ladies whispering that they were saying that they would soon build another charity shelter. They discussed that the saint from Fereshte was preparing a great deed. Her kindness was so great that even angels would weep. The moment Calypso saw Diana from these rumors, he was finally convinced. It was this girl, shining with kindness and naivety, that he could use for his own purposes. He looked at her during that reception, and a wonderful plan for further action was born in his head. The bell on the tower shone dazzlingly with gold in the bright rays of the sun. Snow-white doves circled in the clear sky. It was on such a day that Duke Ernst led the saint from Fereshte down the aisle, winning the heart of the naive and stupid Diana turned out to be a very simple task for him. With the help of the dowry that Marquis Fereshte gave for his daughter, Calypso was able to overcome financial difficulties and even start a new business. But to his disappointment, this joy did not last long. Instead of simply supporting the Duke financially, the Marquis constantly interfered in every matter. Even pretending that Calypso loved Diana became unbearable for him. He felt disgusted. Diana was outstanding simply by the fact of her origin. Now Calypso stood in the midst of the luxury that the Marquis had given to the strange orphan, and the girl asked him how the room was, because it had changed so much. And before, when it belonged to Catherine, it was so dull, Isel wanted the Duke to see it too. Calypso replied that everything was fine, but he would probably go. The girl picked up a handful of jewels and told her father to look at it. She spread her hands full of jewels to the sides and asked if they weren't beautiful. She admitted that it was the first time she had received something like that. Calypso asked why she said it was the first time this had happened to her. Isel wondered how it really was. Then she sat with her mother and they talked about the Duke. Isel asked if it was all true. She admitted that she did not want to call the Duke her father. It was easier for her to talk about him as that person. Diana looked at her daughter, ready for any questions she might have. An indignant Isel would very much like to know if the Duke really used her mother simply for money. Diana put a cup of tea on the table and said that yes, that was exactly it. Diana said that if he saw the gifts his grandfather sent, he would probably be in shock because of his low self-esteem, like the insects that crawl everywhere. Okay, Isel said enthusiastically. She will create a situation to manipulate him further. She asked her mother to help her with this. And now the Duke asked Isel how it was that she was seeing such wealth for the first time, because things simply couldn't be going so badly for the Marquis' family, to which she belonged. With her eyes downcast, the girl replied that everything he knew about the Fereshte family concerned only the main house. The girl said with tears that the lush dresses, the sparkling jewelry, the neatly folded handkerchiefs were all completely new to her, who had always lived in poverty. She confessed to the Duke that it was absolutely terrible to be an aristocrat and yet live in poverty. Calypso immediately remembered his childhood in darkness and humiliation when he sat in despair in his room, throwing off the clothes unworthy of him. The Duke knelt down next to the girl to wipe away her tears and console her, but Isel assured her that she was fine. Isel said that because her father and mother accepted her, that was why she received such expensive gifts from the Marquis. Calypso said he had no idea she lived like that. The sun's rays shone brightly through the new windows of the chambers in which Isel would now live. The girl said that she had one request for the Duke. He allowed her to speak, and she explained that she would like to walk with him every day, but it would probably be difficult. Calypso replied that he did not see anything difficult in this, so he agreed. Isel enthusiastically assured that it would be just great. Diana received a small parcel in a dark green box. She was in bed. Belinda, standing next to her, said that a parcel for her ladyship had arrived from the Marquis. Diana happily thanked Belinda and said that everything was fine. Attached to the green box was a glowing glass ball filled with magic that floated in the air. Can you hear me?" sounded to the amazement of Diana, who froze with her arms outstretched, looking at this ball. This magic could transmit an image of Diana's father at a distance. The Marquis looked at his daughter. Diana could not understand what it was, where such a magical instrument came from that allows you to talk at such a great distance. The Marquis replied that he had to spend some money. The Marquis said that it would be possible to send a letter, but wouldn't that be inconvenient for Diana herself? Each time Diana had to avoid his surveillance, all letters from her father were under close surveillance, so he had to disguise them as ordinary conversations about all sorts of trifles. Diana realized that her father was also very tired of all this. The Marquis said that, by the way, regarding what Diana asked for, preparations have been completed. The Marquis studied the papers that lay on the table in front of him, and only then continued the conversation. He showed Diana a purple flower in a pot and said it was laurel bender. It was a plant that was a combination of bay leaf and bender grass, revived through magic. Laurel bender, Diana said thoughtfully, as if tasting the name. They met Calypso at the table in the living room. The Duke looked thoughtfully at Diana. Then he asked her what was the matter. "Alice hasn't been around at all lately. Izel and the new servants have been keeping a very close eye on everyone, which is probably why she can't appear here so often today." Diana asked Calypso with a smile how things were going with their financial situation now. The Duke replied that everything was as usual, neither bad nor good. Calypso angrily asked why Diana was even talking about this. Had she run out of money? Diana replied that, in fact, she had some interesting information. Calypso immediately asked what kind of information it was, but the Duchess thoughtfully noted that it was probably a secret. Diana assured that the Marquis had started a new business. These words could not fail to interest Calypso. He wanted to know the details about the Marquis Fereshté's business. The thing was that Marquis Fereshté discovered a new medicine. It has an excellent pain-relieving effect and is useful for all diseases. Diana said that this plant could be called a panacea for all known diseases. We are talking about laurel bender. Calypso never had the slightest talent for business. After his marriage to Diana, he barely managed to cope with the financial crisis, and now barely returns the invested capital in everything he touched. And now they had the business project of Marquis Fereshté. This was definitely a grand discovery. It was important to get exclusive sales rights as soon as possible, so Calypso, stumbling with excitement, asked how they could get them. Diana thought that this was why she had thrown him this particular bait. This conversation made quite an impression on Calypso, as Diana had planned. She rose from the sofa and walked towards the Duke, telling him that he didn't need to worry at all because he had her. She assured Calypso that she would bring him the seedlings. "Wife!" Calypso suddenly exclaimed, looking at her. Diana's golden curls fluttered with her quick movements. Calypso pulled Diana towards him and hugged her, saying a big thank you. "Laurel bender, what effect does it have?" Diana asked her father, using her magical communication device. The Marquis replied that this was excitement, hallucinations, auditory illusions. If treated lightly, it could lead to a terrible tragedy. It would be a real deadly poison. The Marquis was sure that it was perfect for their plan. Hugging the Duke with a smile, Diana said that she loved him very much, and that she was glad that she could help him in some way. She couldn't believe that the Duke was so stupid, and if he had once deceived Diana, then why couldn't he deceive everyone else too? Now Calypso will become just a grandiose swindler. Diana looked at the transparent glass of the display case, through which she could see the items stored there. Diana studied them very thoughtfully. Among the bottles stored on the shelves of the cabinet, Diana did not find any soft cotton or star shards from the sea, but the ingredients for alchemy should always be in sufficient quantity. Diana has been too busy lately and hasn't paid any attention to this. She couldn't know what exactly Alice might do next time, so she would need to stock up on the necessary potion ingredients in reserve. Diana called Shane and Milan and asked them to quickly prepare everything for the exit. When asked where she was going, Diana replied that she wanted to take a little walk around the shopping district. There was something that needed to be bought. Milan was incredibly happy. She exclaimed that it would be necessary to dress Her Highness beautifully. She would be able to show the lady how her skills had improved. Diana looked at her maids with surprise, and Shane asked why Milan was so happy. Milan replied that it was just that Her Highness hadn't been out anywhere for so long. Diana thought that she should treat them to some desserts. In the golden rays of the sun, the city shone with splendor. The carriage rolled through its streets. It was soon announced that they had arrived at the scene. Diana thanked him and got out of the carriage. She was wearing a new fashionable dress and a wide-brimmed hat. The Duchess walked resolutely towards the low building decorated with banners. "Welcome," came the voice as Diana entered the building. Diana looked with interest at the bottles with a variety of ingredients displayed on the shelves. She discovered a crystal of purification among them. After examining it, she realized that the one she usually ordered was much smaller. Diana thought that since making potions required a lot of crystals, she would just buy everything at once this time. She wondered if there would be any fire crystals here. Diana walked along the shelves with curiosity, examining their contents. To reach some of the shelves, Diana had to stand very high in her heels. They were simply terrifyingly high. Diana reached for them with all her might. She couldn't get the jar she needed, but another person's hand came to her aid. Wrapped in a hooded cloak that hid his face, the stranger was much taller than her and therefore easily took out the necessary object to hand to Diana and ask her to be careful. Diana turned to thank him and he pulled back his hood, revealing it to be Lueri. Diana asked Lueri what he was doing here. The magician lowered his eyes. In front of them stood a multitude of colorful bottles with a variety of contents, and Lueri said with a chuckle that it was quite natural for a magician to go into a magic shop. Lueri explained that during the experiment all the ingredients ran out, so he asked not to pay attention if his clothes were a little dirty. Diana also laughed and said that she understood that. "So, what else can I give you?" the magician asked, taking the basket by the handle. Diana thought about it. It seemed she needed mermaid's tears, sunset sand, and crushed scales. Lueri explained that the ingredients that can be found near the water are on the second floor. He extended his hand to Diana and asked her to be careful on the stairs, and then suggested that they go. Diana asked if the magician would go with her. Looking into her emerald eyes, Lueri replied that he had to go, because if the lady couldn't reach some shelf again, someone would have to help her with this matter. Diana thanked the magician. He offered her to lean on his arm, and they began to climb the stairs to the second floor. On the second floor there were large windows from which light fell onto the books displayed on the shelves. There were many different people there looking at the goods. Lueri and Diana also slowly walked between the rows. Diana could not resist and said that there was such beauty around. Stopping near the next bottles, Diana said that it was very good that she personally came here today. Diana admitted that this was her first time in the store. She usually orders ingredients by mail, but now she was so carried away by looking around that she didn't even notice how time flew by. Lueri smiled, admiring her enthusiasm, and said that he completely agreed with her. Diana saw where the mermaid's tears were, but it seemed there was only one jar left and the Duchess hurried after it. She almost managed to take the ingredient she needed so much. A tall, plump, mustachioed man grabbed her hand and glanced sideways at Diana. Diana looked at the man and said that if he was not in a hurry, then could he please give in to her. The man muttered that he had taken the item first. Diana pressed her hand to her chest and begged, because she simply needed this remedy. The man gritted his teeth in undisguised frustration. Suddenly, he roughly pushed Diana away from him, causing her to stumble. The man shouted that he had taken them first, so they belonged to him. Diana lost her footing and realized that she would inevitably fall now. Lueri saw everything that was happening with an excited face. The magician rushed to help his lady as fast as he could. He gently helped Diana up and asked how she was feeling. Then Lueri looked at the stranger who dared to push Diana. Hugging Diana by the shoulders, the magician asked the stranger what the hell he was doing, because she could have received a serious injury. Lueri helped Diana up and said that, in fact, his mistress had taken him first, so the stranger should give her what she wanted. Diana rushed to Lueri to assure her that she was okay, so they better get out of here. Diana looked with excitement at what was happening now. The stranger stood in front of the magician and, calling him a pathetic loser, asked what had happened and whether he had come to beg him. People gradually gathered around them, because the quarrel attracted the attention of everyone around. The magician told the stranger to apologize to his mistress, but the stranger did not understand. Diana took several decisive steps towards the disputants and declared that she could tolerate insults directed at her. She then added that she would not tolerate a stranger insulting Lueri. Diana screamed at the stranger to apologize to the magician immediately. The stranger said that it was all just a joke. He asked what was wrong with calling a spade, which sounded strange to Diana. Lueri tried to stop her, explaining that he was fine and not giving Diana a chance to object. The magician leaned towards Diana and whispered in her ear that such people should be treated the same way they treated others. "Hey, you!" shouted Lueri, stepping forward. He asked if the stranger was a nobleman from the second duke's domain. He replied that it was so, and of course he was on a different level than some idiot beggar, and if we are talking about who he is, then he is a baron. Lueri asked if the stranger still hadn't realized who was standing in front of him. The stranger looked at the magician with curiosity and incomprehension, wanting to hear an explanation. The magician solemnly announced that the Grand Duchess of the Grand Duchy of Ernst stood before them. She was a person of a completely different level, not like some baron, a fool who had no idea what dignity was. "Those eyes," the baron exclaimed as his gaze and Diana's met. He remembered them. He had seen those eyes only once, at a ball in the palace, golden hair shining in the sun and beautiful emerald eyes. She was a saint that even angels admired. Everyone talked about her, and now she really stood before him, the baron. Diana simply said that this is true. She is indeed the Grand Duchess of these lands. She gave her name. She was Diana Elfereshte. The former offender fell to his knees, bowing to Diana to the ground. He begged her to forgive him for his insolence, because she was her grace, the Grand Duchess. He dared not to recognize that such a high-ranking person was in front of him. Diana looked down at the man and said that her request remained the same. The baron should apologize not to her, but to Lueri. She explained that he was not a beggar at all, but a candidate for the post of the next head of the Magic Tower, Lueri de Constantine. The baron asked with horror if this was really the head of the Magic Tower. He began to bow earnestly and beg Mr. Lueri to forgive him, because he was very sorry that such a misunderstanding had occurred. He asked the Grand Duchess and the powerful magician to forget his clumsiness. He held out a box with the goods that Diana needed and asked her to accept it from him. And he himself would pay for everything, he insisted, although late, so as an apology, he would now like to give the Duchess this thing. "Enough," said Diana, who was very uncomfortable watching this strange scene. Diana told the baron to try to stop judging people by their appearance in the future. She wanted him to get rid of this bad habit. Turning to leave, Diana said one last thing, that someone like the baron was a disgrace to the nobility of the Edith Empire. It was funny because for Lueri and for Diana herself, nothing had changed. But this baron, trembling on his knees, simply found out that they were the Grand Duchess and the future head of the Magic Tower, and immediately changed his attitude towards them, as if he had changed his shoes. What could be unclear here? A person's true worth was not dependent on status, Diana thought as she and Lueri walked away from the unpleasant scene together. On the street where they went out, the sunset was already breaking, filling everything with a special light. "Madam," said Lueri as they walked past the white doves sitting on the pavement. "Madam," he called her. They passed the alleys illuminated by lit lanterns. Lueri urged Diana to wait for him as they walked across the bridge, she in front and he a little behind. Finally, Diana stopped abruptly. She turned to the magician and asked if perhaps she had been too rude. And then she apologized. She explained that she began to get too angry when she saw such people in front of her. Lueri laughed and said he had no idea what could be rude about it since the Duchess looked so cool. So, talking, they walked further through the Sunset City. Later, already in the ducal mansion, light poured through the large windows. It illuminated a woman and a girl sitting at the table. The girl was reading a large book out loud. "Is there any greater grief in this world than to see your own child die?" Catherine read. "This is the bitterest fate, surpassing all other trials," Catherine read, while Diana drank her tea with painstaking calm. "But this is only one of the many pains we are destined to endure," continued Catherine, pressing her hand to her chest. Diana asked Catherine to stop because she noticed that her voice was hoarse. If she was in pain, then there was no need to read on. Catherine was surprised because she had never been given a break while reading before. Diana pressed her hand to her cheek and said that everything was true. She was just worried about the Duchess of Iverg. She explained that this lady valued the voice above all else, and Catherine exclaimed something loudly in surprise. Diana asked the girl if she didn't know this. Catherine cried out that of course she didn't know this, if her mother never told her about it. Duchess Celine of the House of Huang Iverg was a woman with a fine taste for the arts, but she adored music above all else. In a past life, in order to gain the favor of the influential Duchess, Diana specially hired a vocal teacher for Catherine. At that time, Diana still sincerely wanted Catherine to become the wife of Prince Sawyer. Mother! Catherine exclaimed loudly, distracting Diana's attention from the reflection in her teacup she was examining. Catherine was determined to tell her parents to find her a music teacher. Diana asked if the girl was sure that this was necessary for her now, since she was already studying magic, and whether it would not be too difficult for her. But Catherine objected that all this was unimportant, since first of all, she had to please the Duchess of Ivergue. Then Diana agreed. She said that she would find a teacher, but only on one condition. Diana smiled and said that Catherine would study with her new sister. "What?" Catherine shouted loudly and asked if she meant Azel, whether Diana called her sister. Diana replied that everything was exactly like that, and said that if Catherine did not want it, then how could she know? To which Catherine immediately assured that she agreed. Diana admired out loud how much Catherine had grown. She said that she was a great girl, although deep down Diana was sure that with such a voice, studying music was still a waste of time, so Catherine should prepare to lose to the real heiress again. Catherine closed her eyes and clenched her fists, convincing herself that for Prince Sawyer she was ready to do even more and could endure even more. Diana looked at the girl and thought that it was time to go. "Come, Catherine," she said, and suggested that they should take a walk together, as in the old days, for she had time. "Yes, Mother," answered Catherine, and they stood up and headed towards the exit of the room. At this time, Azel was walking through the sun-drenched garden towards the wooden fence. The girl was serious and focused. "Azel," she heard, and froze for a moment. "Father," the girl exclaimed then, and quickly turned around with a joyful smile. The Duke was indeed standing nearby. Catherine told the Duke that she had been waiting for him so much. Calypso asked how long she had to wait for him. The girl answered that no, time flew by quickly, and she was happy just from the wait. Calypso asked why she was happy, and Azel explained that the thought of walking with her father made every moment joyful. Azel took the Duke by the hand and said, "Let's go." Calypso and Azel walked hand in hand along the path into the depths of the park. They said that the scent of the flowers was wonderful and must have had a calming effect. Calypso looked at the serene girl next to him and did not understand how she could be so happy. After all, he did not give her any jewelry or dresses, it was just a walk. "Beauty," said Azel, looking at the flowers. Calypso wondered why such a girl grew up without family care. Finally, he asked her how it happened that she ended up in an orphanage. Azel turned to him and replied that it was her father who decided this, and that her parents didn't get along. Looking down, Azel sadly admitted that her father had hated her all her life because she was too similar to her mother. She said that it was such a strong hatred that he even wanted to kill her. Calypso apologized for asking about it, but the girl assured him that everything was fine and called him father. Then he asked how things were going with her mother. Azel replied that she died early precisely because her father hated her so much. She looked at Calypso and told her that her father killed her mother. Azel's eyes flashed with hidden hatred, and she thought that it was the man who was now standing right in front of her who did it. Calypso asked how this was even possible, and the girl replied that her story was indeed quite unusual. Azel stepped aside and turned her back to the Duke, and then said that her father killed his wife for money. She said that he killed her mother, the heiress of Fereshte, because he was going to take over her fortune. Calypso remarked that the man was disgusting, and Azel said that it was better to live like this, since he abandoned his daughter in an orphanage and disappeared. Azel turned to the Duke, tears in her eyes, and asked if he thought she was truly a bad daughter. She had cut roses before and now dropped one on the grass. Calypso hurried to hug the girl. He said, no, he did not consider her a bad daughter at all, because only adults are bad. He didn't see at all the gloomy expression on Azel's face as she listened to him now. The plan to kill Diana was made by Azel. He never even had time to say how she died. He wasn't to blame for it. Azel thanked him, still remaining in his comforting embrace. All this was seen by Catherine, who looked at her father with disbelieving eyes. "Father!" Catherine cried out loudly and asked what he was doing. She ran closer and pushed Azel away from her father, causing her to scream as well. "Move away," Catherine demanded angrily from her. She asked why Azel dared to walk with her father. Calypso was quick to intervene, asking Catherine why she was behaving so outrageously. He asked her if his walk with his daughter could be a reason for anger. Catherine asked, annoyed, which other daughter he meant. Azel, with her head bowed, asked Catherine for forgiveness. She said that she had no idea that her sister also liked walking, and then offered to walk together from tomorrow if Catherine wanted it. Yes, said Calypso, and explained that it was he who suggested the walk, and Azel had nothing to do with it. He just didn't understand how he could not be angry now. Trembling with anger, Catherine declared that the Duke was always too busy to walk with her in the garden. She asked why he was doing this now with this beggar woman who had come from nowhere. Anger and tension literally thickened the air between them. "Enough," cried Calypso, and he slapped Catherine across the face and then told her not to test his patience any longer. But Catherine went out into the garden in a good mood. She was happy about how nice the weather was today. Her smart shoes walked quickly across the lawns. Well, and then she saw her father hugging this sister who was forced upon her. Catherine stood next to Diana and watched this completely unexpected scene for her, losing her temper. It seemed to her that the world around her had suddenly become gloomy and hostile. "Father," Catherine cried out, unable to contain herself. She wanted to know what he was doing. In a flash of rage, Catherine pounced on Azel and pushed the beggar away from her father. But the Duke suddenly took her side, and not his own daughter's side, and angrily asked what all this meant. He asked if father and daughter couldn't just take a walk together, since there was nothing at all reprehensible about it. Catherine did not expect to hear the Duke so quickly start calling this beggar his daughter, and himself her father. That's why she called Azel a dirty girl who came from nowhere. Catherine stood in front of the Duke, and Azel hid behind his back, and the Duke told Catherine to stop, not to test his patience. He even raised his hand to the girl. Catherine, with tears in her eyes, pressed her palm to the reddened place of the blow, looked at her father, and asked how he could do such a thing to her. Calypso turned to Diana and said that it seemed that up until this point he had spoiled Catherine too much. She had become too arrogant. Diana, looking down, said that it was all her fault. Azel stood nearby. Her large emerald eyes seemed confused. She pressed her hand to her mouth in fear. In fact, Azel thought that Catherine was just a stupid girl and secretly made fun of her. Catherine saw what was happening. She angrily rushed at Azel and screamed that she would kill her. Calypso held her back, demanding that she stop. Calypso said that he could not forgive this. From today, he was putting Catherine under house arrest for a week. She would have to sit quietly in her room. Catherine screamed that her father was treating her unfairly. Calypso suggested that Azel leave here, otherwise they would be rude to her here. They walked further along the path together, and Catherine remained sitting and watching them go. In her room, Catherine could only cry bitterly, hiding her face. She heard someone knocking on the door of her room. Catherine sat up in bed. She hoped that it was her father, that he had come to apologize to her for this whole situation. It was Alice who came to tell her daughter that she had already told her 1,000 times to control her emotions. The girl glanced at her and thought that her mother was not on her side either, and then asked her not to yell at her. She screamed that she hated everyone, her father, this girl, and her mother. Catherine fell back onto the bed and began to sob. She wiped away bitter tears with her sleeve and thought about why she had become like this. How nice it would be if her mother had been a Grand Duchess, if her mother had not been a fake. She turned around and asked Alice why she had not become the Grand Duchess instead of Diana. Alice looked at her, not expecting that she would be accused of lacking nobility of her impoverished, noble family. For her, these thoughts had been just as painful for many years. She believed that Catherine was right now. She had asked herself these questions even when she herself was such a child. She also wanted to know why it happened that she was born into a poor family. She was outraged that her father was always so short of money that he couldn't even buy her a new dress. Her father only apologized to her with visible awkwardness. This story began when Alice was 10 years old. Her poor and worthless father still had one pride, his connection with the Marquis of Ferechte. The naive and good-natured count was to the liking of Marquis Ferechte, and thanks to him, Alice visited the Marquis's estate for the first time. The Marquis himself met them at the entrance to his house. "Here you are, Bert," said the Marquis, seeing his friend. The Count bowed and greeted the Marquis, and then thanked him for the invitation. He told his daughter that Alice should say hello too, and the girl said hello and said that her name was Alice Blair. The Marquis said he was glad to see Alice and invited her to sit down. Alice simply couldn't take her eyes off anything around her. The tea set, the furniture, even the floor underfoot, and, of course, the huge lush garden, all of this was top class. While Alice was looking at the unprecedented desserts, the clear voice of her peer was heard. "Father!" exclaimed the then unknown girl at the moment when Alice brought the treat to her mouth. The girl had golden hair and green eyes and was wearing an elegant lilac dress. She happily told her father that she had arrived. Alice froze looking at this girl. Alice's father rose and greeted Lady Letitia, who in turn greeted Baron Blair. Alice glanced sideways at her father, thinking that he was bowing very pitifully before some girl her age. Did he really have no pride at all? Her father told her to say hello too. Alice greeted Lady Fereshte and said that she was Alice Blair of the Baron Blair family. "Wow," said the girl with emerald eyes. The girl greeted Alice, expressing great delight at this meeting. She turned to her father and asked if they could play with Lady Blair in her room. The Marquis replied that of course he would have some refreshments served there. They went into the girls' chambers. The maid brought them a lot of desserts. Alice thanked them for the invitation, and the girl replied that it was not worth thanking. It was the first time she had a guest the same age as her. She was very happy about it. She explained that her father had told her a lot about Alice, and he had also said that Baron Blair was a very good man, so she was interested in what this lady was like. The girl was very glad to finally meet, but Alice grew more and more gloomy and thought about the room, which was several times larger than her own room. The girl had very bright emerald eyes with which she looked at Alice. She said that if she doesn't mind, she would like to be friends with her in the future. She asked if she could call her new friend by her first name. Alice pressed her hand to her chest and replied that, of course, she hoped for further acquaintance, such was her first meeting with Diana. Much later, Alice cried bitterly over the papers scattered across the floor. Diana sat down next to her and asked if Alice was saying that she would refuse to enroll only because she did not have enough money for her studies. She asked her not to worry. Diana assured that she would find these funds. Diana turned out to be a surprisingly convenient target. She was the only inheritance that Alice's father left her when he died. Diana was a saint blessed by God. For Alice to touch her pure heart, just a few tears were enough. Diana generously provided her friend not only with tuition and living expenses necessary to obtain the qualification of a doctor, but also with the best dresses and jewelry. Alice always wore the images presented by Diana at all balls and events. The main thing was that Diana introduced Alice to everyone at events as her best friend. She took Alice to all the social places, introducing Lady Alice Blair to important people. Therefore, despite the very modest title of Baroness, the arrogant aristocrats did not dare to treat her with disdain. Alice told Diana that she shouldn't offer to lend her the dress, because she couldn't keep abusing her friend's kindness. But Diana exclaimed that it wasn't so. Diana took Alice's hands in hers and squeezed them, and then said that she had told her ally that she was her best friend. Diana was a useful and reliable shield for a girl who had absolutely nothing else. Alice thanked the lady, saying that she did not know what would have become of her if it were not for Diana, but she believed that she was not like her father. She would not humiliate herself in front of Fereshte. She will simply find maximum use for it and use it throughout her life. This thought made Alice burst into laughter, which she could not restrain. She laughed loudly at Diana's stupidity, which was entirely in her hands. It was pouring rain that day, and both friends were sitting in the mansion. Under the windows, a fountain was splashing and roaring, and flowers were getting wet in the flower beds. Excuse me, what are you talking about?" came up in a conversation between friends. Alice asked Diana what wedding she was talking about now. Diana replied with a smile that she was going to tell her everything anyway, even though it was a marriage of convenience, to which Alice asked who the groom was. Diana said that this was His Highness Duke Calypso of the Grand Duchy of Arenst. "Oh, so that's how it is," said Alice, and he asked if they had met before. Diana said with a smile that yes, he is a very good person. He said that he will always take care of her and protect her. She had heard of the Grand Duchy of Arenst before. It was one of the noble families of royal blood. Alice thought that, after all these love games of aristocrats always represent the same thing, and the Duke is certainly ugly and completely ill-mannered. Alice decided that, who knows, maybe the day will come when she will worry about Diana. But then the day came when Diana introduced Alice to the one she had told her so much about. Diana told the Duke, who was walking towards them, that in front of him was her closest friend, Viscountess Alicia LeBlair. The Duke turned out to be a young and attractive man. She smiled at Alice and said that he was glad to meet Viscountess Blair. Alice realized how much she had wished until that moment that Diana's fiancé was not perfect. She curtsied and asked if his lordship had come from afar. The Duke looked kindly at Diana and said that it would be nothing to him if he could see his dear. He planted a kiss on Diana's forehead and assured her that he was not at all tired, and she laughed and said that it tickled. Alice looked at this scene with a gloomy look. It was too much like a work of art in which there was simply no place for her. "Your Excellency," Diana turned to her betrothed. She asked if she could invite Alice to the duchy after the wedding. The Duke said whatever his dear wanted. Alice said that the car was running late. She was going to check. "No, Allie," objected Diana. "You couldn't force the guest to do this. She'll go herself." With a sweet smile, Diana turned around and suggested that she and the Duke chat for now. Diana walked out and closed the door behind her. Alice thought that she had planned it that way. She understood that, of course, Diana would propose it herself and leave herself. It was a sunny day, filled with bright light and heat. Alice noticed that it was still a long time until summer, but the room was already unbearably hot. Diana said that if his lordship did not mind, she would ask permission to open the window. "Open it a little," said the Duke. Alice stood up and walked towards the windows past the sofa on which the Duke was sitting. At one point she gasped and staggered because her heel broke. She managed to fall so successfully that she ended up right on the Duke's lap. He asked if she was okay, and Alice assured him that of course she was. She was fine, thanks to his lordship catching her and then asking her to forgive her. She wanted to beat him back. She wanted it so much that it was impossible to tell whether it was because she envied Diana or because she herself had fallen in love at first sight. She looked at how these two were carried away by each other, and her hands shook with anger. There was no rush for the plan she had come up with, so for a while Alice simply watched from the sidelines. From then on, every time Calypso came, Alice tried to use Diana. She was always and everywhere with them, even if she kept her distance. Alice knew that no man could resist a woman's body. Little by little, slowly, Diana left her mark on his memory. It was too easy to deceive the pure and naive Diana. This is how the days passed in the mansion of Duke Ernst. One day Diana stood there, deep in thought, trying to decide what to do. Alice came up and asked what had happened, and Diana replied that there was a seal in a box on the table that his lordship had brought to prepare for the wedding. It seemed he had forgotten to pick it up. Diana admitted that this important seal could not be lost, and she could not even send a servant. It was difficult. Diana looked at her notebook and said that there was nothing to be done. She would have to cancel or postpone everything for today. Alice closed the notebook with one movement. "No need," said Alice. "She can carry it in on the way." Diana looked at her friend and said, "No thank you, Allie." But Alice confidently said that she would also take a walk for once. It would be quick through the tunnel. Diana said in confusion that Alice was still a guest in their estate, but Alice smiled convincingly, stopping her hesitant objections. She simply said that Diana was her closest friend. Soon, Alice was already sitting in the carriage, and Diana thanked her warmly. She said that she trusted her with the seal, and Alice replied that there was no need to worry. The carriage departed, and Diana remained in the estate and for some time simply watched it go. She thought that it was her great happiness that she had a friend like Allie in her life. She didn't know that her friend might have her own calculations. It was already night, and a narrow crescent moon appeared in the starry sky. The two were drinking tea and discussing pressing matters. The Duke's interlocutor asked how he was doing, how his bride was, that girl from Fereshte. Calypso replied that it was a rather stupid question, because arranged marriages always remained the same. There was no smell of love there. The Duke's interlocutor laughed and said that Calypso was also quite cold-blooded. Calypso replied that he could not do anything. He needed the Marquise's help. He also said that it was hard to play someone you were not at all like, at which point a servant reported to his lordship that Viscountess Blair had arrived. Viscountess Blair, Calypso thought with surprise. The Duke's interlocutor said that it seemed that he was an important guest, so he would probably go, and Calypso let him go. The door opened and the guest's shoes stepped into the room. "I have come to see you, Duke, your highness," said Alice, bowing in reverence. She looked up and looked Calypso straight in the eyes. He asked how the Viscountess came to be there. Alice explained that it was because Lady Fereshte was busy preparing for the wedding. The girl handed the box to the Duke and said that she had come to return the seal he had forgotten, and asked if it was his. "Yes, thank you," Calypso responded and took the box from her hands. He never expected that at that moment Alice would rush into his arms. Calypso asked in surprise what the girl was doing. "I heard everything, your highness," said Alice. She put her arms around Calypso's neck and said, looking into his eyes, that she had heard the whole conversation, heard absolutely everything. Alice stood for some time at the door of this room, waiting for permission to enter. She realized with surprise that the Duke was also just using Diana. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, that this marriage was just a matter of convenience because the Duke needed the help of the Marquise Ferisht. Alice thought that all the sweet talk of Diana's fiancé was just a mask. He was just the same as she was. She didn't know whether to tell Diana the truth, and the Duke tried to explain that they seemed to have had some kind of misunderstanding. Alice said that she would not tell her friend all the details. She confessed that she fell in love with His Excellency at first sight. She asked if he also felt attracted to her, wasn't she right? Calypso asked the girl directly what she wanted from him. "Love? Your love," Alice said with feeling, assuring that this was all she wanted. This was quite unexpected for Alice. The seal, forgotten by everyone, fell at their feet and rolled across the floor. Alice pressed herself against the Duke's lips, and that night they became one. The plan to kill Diana was recently hatched, and Calypso was actively involved in it. The first step was to get a job as a doctor. Silly Diana didn't suspect anything until the very end. She was very happy to see her friend. Alice hid her pregnancy from everyone and gave birth to Catherine in secret. Then Diana gave birth, and Alice lied to Calypso that the Duchess's child did not survive. This allowed Catherine to take her place as heir to the Duke's household. They were a happy secret family. Everything was going swimmingly. Getting rid of Diana was the perfect completion of the plan. She needed to understand that the one who had been blessed with love was Catherine, not Diana. But what happened next? With the help of the deity, Diana regained her sight, and Isel, who was supposed to disappear after her escape, returned as an adopted daughter. Alice understood with horror that if this continues, then their wonderful plan will be in danger. They will all be in danger. Now she stood in front of the bed, on which Catherine was curled up in anger. The girl asked her what else, and Alice exclaimed, had her daughter really forgotten everything already? Alice reminded her daughter that soon all restrictions would be lifted, and a retest for magic would be conducted. This was not the time to be so calm. Catherine sat up in bed and asked dismissively why she should waste her time on someone like Isel. Alice noted that this girl was not to be underestimated in any way. She said that if they made the slightest mistake, they would be the ones thrown out of here, not Isel. This was something Catherine never expected to hear from her own mother. In a completely different place, the witch's hands were outstretched over a magic ball. A woman wrapped in a hooded cloak said that a dear guest had arrived. "Welcome," she said. "All this happened in a small house in the wilderness." A visitor came there and went straight to the counter, behind which stood the innkeeper, who asked her what she would like to order. She said that she heard that the real owner here was called Shadow. The innkeeper replied that when there is no light, there is no shadow, and then asked what kind of shadow the visitor was looking for. She replied that there is one ray of light that must disappear. The innkeeper led the guest into a dark room. A woman in a black cloak and a hood that only slightly revealed her red hair entered the darkness. "Come in, Alice," said the fortune teller over the magic ball. She noticed that this was the first time they had communicated like this, not counting letters. "Hello, Cassandra," said Alice, and said that the guild had covered its tracks so carefully. Cassandra noted that the guest was a good girl for coming. She would not regret it. She asked about the reward. Alice wanted to know the answer to one question. Cassandra looked at her interlocutor and extended her hand. Alice put a pearl into this hand and asked him to speak. Alice wanted to know if there was a way to find out the child's parentage. Each royal family had a seal symbolizing the lineage, and by the stone in this seal one could find out whether the blood was mixed with the royal blood. If you do a kinship test, whether there is royal blood, whose child it is, when he was born, all this can be found out. Alice gritted her teeth, realizing that this meant that Isel had not come to the Marquis' house by deception. If Diana finds out that Catherine doesn't have magic and decides to do a blood test, then things are bad. Then this girl will take Catherine's place. In desperation, Alice said that she wanted to ask for something. "Get rid of the child," she said decisively. Cassandra studied the woman standing in front of her for a long time. Then she burst into loud laughter and declared that she loved people like Alice very much. Of all the requests, this was the one that was heard. This is a man completely imbued with evil. "Okay," said Cassandra. She was ready to tell the visitor about the place where this could be done. She handed her a note with an address and told her to come there. There was a full moon in the sky and crows were sitting on the tree branches. Alice made her way through the rough terrain, wondering what kind of wilderness this man lived in. It was so strange that a guild member would live in such a place. Alice could only hope that he simply wasn't a scammer. Having reached the building, Alice finally knocked on the door. He opened the door for her, and a tall, gloomy-looking man came out onto the threshold. He was missing one eye, which was hidden by a bandage. Alice showed Cassandra's note and explained that he had been recommended to her. She had one important matter to ask him about. Leaning towards the note, the stranger noted that without a doubt it was Cassandra's handwriting. "Come in," he said, turning to go back into the house himself. They sat down at a small table, and the stranger said that he didn't really clean here, so he hoped for the guests' understanding. Then he asked what her business was. Alice said that we need to get rid of the child who is doing magic. The stranger noticed that she had come to the right place, because if the enemy is a magician, then ordinary people cannot get to him. A sheet of paper fluttered out of the desk drawer. The stranger laid it before him and prepared to write it down, asking Alice to tell him about this child, because he was ready to take on the matter. Alice said that the girl's name was Izel. She had recently become Ernst's adopted daughter. She had long blonde hair, emerald eyes. She had inherited her mother's magical abilities and possessed freezing magic. The stranger noted that all this meant that the girl was a princess and reminded that the higher the position, the more dangerous. Alice looked at everything the stranger had written down, and he asked her to check the amount. Alice screamed in surprise. It was too big a sum. Maybe something was wrong here after all. Magic swirled around Alice, causing her to freeze in place. The stranger assumed that the visitor didn't really know who he was, and that Cassandra wasn't that kind. He looked at Alice and said that he was a magician. Originally from Mataba, he was a follower of the Matabas. This word was familiar to Alice. She asked why the Matab was here. He answered that he was here because he was expelled, blinded by money. He did something that he should not have done at all. Speaking of which, he remarked gloomily, and asked if Alice would be signing this contract. "I will," Alice answered decisively, unwavering in her determination to protect her daughter's rights. The check had to be sent to the address given. The very thought of Izel made him shudder. Her gaze, filled with the desire for revenge, was sharp as a knife blade. Alice thought that now everything would be over with Izel, but she asked to deal with the girl as soon as possible. At this time, the light was brightly burning in the mansion. Diana was in the same room with the maid Shane when she heard her daughter's ringing voice calling out to her. A joyful Izel ran in, clutching the letter to her chest, and said that she had received an invitation to Matab. It was a little strange that this invitation was delivered at night. Diana was surprised by what happened, because Alice said that she went out to buy herbs. But still, it was an ordinary thing, which could not be given much importance. Shine brought the letter and said that it was for the lady. Diana opened the envelope and began to read. She was surprised that there was no address on the envelope. Diana asked her daughter if what she told her was true. She was very surprised and thoughtful, so much so that Izel had to call out to her to bring her out of her reverie. Diana stroked her daughter's hair and said that she remembered something because she had been there as a child too. It was an extraordinary and completely new place for her. It was filled with magical energy flows. "Wow," Izel said excitedly, her eyes shining, and she declared that she simply couldn't wait for this day. Finally, this cherished day has arrived. The sun's rays were shining brightly through the windows of the mansion. "Wait, Izel!" Diana called out to her daughter, who was spinning around in her new outfits and shoes. Yes, she turned to Izel's mother. She was already completely ready to go out, dressed in a traveling suit and hat. Diana said that the girl should take gold with her just in case. Izel objected that this was Matab, gold was not needed there. Diana responded to this that they were needed if you got hungry and wanted to buy something. Izel asked if she could go and walk around the center, and Diana replied that of course she could. "I'm so glad," the girl exclaimed and spun around in delight, for this was the first time she had left this palace as the daughter of a family. Diana looked at her daughter thoughtfully, understanding some things for the first time. She couldn't even think about how Izel felt. Until now, this girl's world had been incredibly narrow. Diana decided that she had to think and care about her more. "Izel," Diana said, looking at her daughter. She couldn't hold back her tears and wiped them with a handkerchief. Izel became worried and asked her mother not to cry, because everything would be fine. Diana said that from now on she will show her daughter the best and take her to the most interesting places. In the south, for example, there is a sea. Its waves are exactly the same color as Izel's eyes. Diana hugged the girl and said that when everything was over, they would go to the sea together. Izel was happy and said that they had agreed. The white horses from the ducal stables were already harnessed to the carriage. Diana went out to see the girl off and asked her to wait a little. "Madam!" suddenly came the loud voice of Belinda, who was running as fast as she could. Having run up, the girl bowed and asked the lady for forgiveness. She said that Sheen had told her to put on a dress this time. Belinda remarked that it was rather uncomfortable, but Diana said that it suited her very well. She said it would be a long journey and asked her to take care of Izel on the way. Belinda was glad that the lady would trust her with this. The carriage set off, its wheels creaking. Izel looked out the carriage window, and Diana waved goodbye to her daughter. Diana watched until the carriage carrying Izel finally disappeared from sight completely. Listening to Belinda's story about the entertainment that awaited her, Izel was very happy. She enthusiastically asked about everything that was there. Belinda told me that minstrels often gather in the square during the day. Last time Milan even asked her to play the flute. Izel exclaimed in delight how she wanted to see all of this as soon as possible. "Are you so happy?" Belinda asked, looking at the girl. "Yes," answered Izel. She explained that this was the first time she was leaving the castle like this. At this time, the carriage was already driving along the forest road between the trees. The girl looked out the window with interest and admitted that around the orphanage where she grew up, there was only sand and sick people. But even this always seemed to her a better option than being locked in the closet that adjoined Catherine's room. Belinda called her a princess. She felt very sorry for her. Izel asked her companion how she ended up in the estate. Belinda replied that it was not an interesting story at all. Izel said that she was interested and asked him to tell her anyway. Belinda said that she once served as a knight at court. She refused a bribe from a high-ranking official, and she was immediately removed from her position. Apparently, they wanted her to turn a blind eye to their dirty tricks. Luckily, her friend Sheen was just looking for secret bodyguards for the Duchess, and Belinda thought this was an excellent chance for her. She met Her Highness again. She was still as beautiful. In response to the girl's surprise, Belinda explained with a laugh that yes, they had known each other for a long time. Belinda also grew up in an orphanage. At that time, they did not have the opportunity to see each other often, but thanks to Her Majesty's donations, they received great help. If it weren't for her, neither Belinda nor the other kids would have been able to live in abundance. Diana's emerald eyes looked so bright and clear. Then Belinda realized that perhaps not all rich people were necessarily bad people, and if she was going to serve someone, then only her. So she thought, and became a knight. Belinda said that in the end she returned under the wing of Her Majesty, which meant that the goal was achieved. Izel laughed happily and said that it was true. The carriage was driving along a forest road, and those who were sitting in it had no idea that a man in a cloak was watching them. It was the same stranger whom Alice had hired not long ago. At this time, Diana continued her studies of the magical arts in the estate. She created ice arrows again and again, and Lueri told her to repeat it again. He asked who she was going to stab with that icicle. He hoped that there would be at least some progress. Diana apologized and asked what the progress was. Lueri leaned toward her and said that, of course, he meant their relationship. Diana stood there in bewilderment, and Lueri laughed and said it was a joke. He asked Diana what was wrong with her, since she was so distracted today. She explained that she was just worried about Izel, and Lueri knew about it too. She explained that her daughter had gone to Matab, and the magician asked in surprise what she had said. Diana replied that there was an excursion there today, and only children who knew how to do magic were invited. Lueri replied that it had been cancelled. Last time a child had used a magic item incorrectly and gotten hurt. Diana was really scared. She didn't expect that something like this could happen. "What? What does this mean?" Diana asked excitedly. Because that letter? It was definitely from Mataba. In horror, Diana fell onto the grass and stared ahead with wide eyes. "Sister, are you okay?" Lueri asked worriedly, rushing to her aid, but Diana covered her eyes with her hands and began to sob. At this time, the carriage in which Izel and Belinda were riding lay overturned on the forest road. The dead coachman lay bleeding in the mud on the side of the road, and Izel was in danger.